What are we waiting? Perfect.
Okay. Call the SAU 67 meeting to order. Welcome everyone. Remote. We've got a full agenda tonight. Dr. Cascadden put it out recently. We are being videotaped, so everyone be on their best behavior in this room at least. And we do have the same crowd as last time. Everyone in attendance is the same as last time, but we will go around the room and give introductions when people speak. We'll do that. So this time I'd like to stand up with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Dr. Cascadden, take it away.
Okay, the minutes have been written, but I didn't have a chance to take my first go through and correct minor spelling errors and so forth, so we'll address them at the next meeting. Just, Roy, if you would go to the first slide, please. In my mind, I always start with our mission, and we always start with the big picture. I think I have been taxed to my utmost to try to care for each person every day, because individuals in this process have different needs, and it's very difficult to address everyone's needs and try to come to consensus, but I still keep that in my mind at the beginning of every day when I come to work. I need to listen to people, I need to hear what they're saying, and I need to try to address the issues. Secondly, we have really tried to focus on the learning. I know a lot of other districts have really focused on their schedule. I think in this district, we have said we need to focus on learning, and we need to focus on the learning model, because that's the key to what we're doing. So really focused on their schedule. And finally, to teach to touch the future. It's not too hard. The future is right here at this point, and it's interesting. Go to the next slide, please, Roy. I think we have to go back to Dr. Chan's goals and keep those in mind. Maximize the in-person educational experience. Absolutely. We will try to have kids in school as much as possible, because I believe, and I think other people have seen, that that is what kids need. Minimize the risk of COVID-19 to students and staff. Absolutely. We will try to make any step we can to make that happen, and there's a lot of details that go in there. It's just that those two goals oftentimes come in kind of clash a little bit with each other. And you have to make decisions. Sometimes one is more favored than the other time it isn't. The third one, we have really kept that in the forefront of our mind, is flexibility. No matter what, conditions are going to change. Even if we open in a green level, there will be individual students, individual staff members, groups of kids who will not be able to come to school because they are either quarantining or they are being at home to wait for symptoms to show. We need to talk about multiple learning options and movement between the models. And I think part of what we're going to be talking tonight as a decision is how you move between the levels. But we kept that in our mind, that it's not just opening school, but it's making decisions as we go forward. And finally, the last one, continue to promote community and social support to families. This has been tough on everybody. I think one of the things, myself, I sometimes struggle with anxiety. I have difficulty sleeping, and it leads to problems in my own mental health. And we have to realize that we're all there, and we need to have community health. We need to keep SEL in mind, and we have to make sure that we're taking care of each other, both physically, socially, and emotionally at this time, because it's a very, very hard time. Next slide, please. I will now turn it over to the board, who is going to summarize comments.
I'm Bryce Larrabee. I'm chair of the Bow School Board. I've been tasked with just giving kind of a summary of the comments that we received last week. We had asked for any comments or questions or anything anyone wanted to submit. to, I think it's bo2schools@bonet.org. And we received approximately 150 comments or questions. Putting that kind of in a frame of reference, we have about 1,900 students in the 4 schools. And I don't know, this population of Dunbarton, 3,000 maybe?
2,500.
So we have about 10,000 people between the 2 towns. And like I said, we had about 150 responses. First of all, I want to thank those people that did submit the questions and comments. And frankly, it was appreciated that almost every comment started with, they appreciated just the difficult tasks that all of us in this community have at hand, and that there was a recognition of all the hard work by the administration and folks. And that was a consistent theme, no matter which direction the questions and comments went. On almost everyone, I mean, I'd say like 85% of the questions and comments had that. I can kind of break down what the responses and things were that we had. And I would say approximately 40 of them had what I would describe as individual questions related to their own situation. They may have a child at Dunbarton Elementary and they have 4 or 5 questions related specifically to how this would impact their students. There was about 40 questions, 40 submissions that had questions like that. And my understanding is when we received those, I believe the administrators, whoever was sort of responsible for that situation. So for example, if it was Dunbarton question, Owen Harrington would presumably get back to them with specific answers if they asked for that. I'm not positive of that, but that's my understanding is what at least was attempted to be done on those. We also received 5 questions related specifically to CRTC. Again, questions related to, that's the Concord program that the Bow High School students attend. And again, I believe we responded to those. We had 3 submitted by SAU employees. I don't recall, I think some of them were questions and some may have been more comments on those 3. And then we had an enormous number of responses related to sports. We had approximately 40 submissions related to simply high school athletics. 37 of those said they want high school athletics to be played, essentially whether it's in the green color code or the yellow. And there were 3 that were opposed to any sports being played. We also had approximately, and I say approximately because some of these fall into different categories. The same comment may fall into a category related to sports. It may fall into questions related to individuals. So it's not, you can't really break it down specific by numbers, but I tried to do that. There were 5 individuals that had said they want middle school sports to be played. And there was 1 submission saying essentially that they want clubs to go forward. You know, if sports are going to go forward, clubs should go forward as well. Then the rest of the submissions were really tied to really the color scheme that we talked about last week. And we had 2 submissions that basically said they'll only send their students if we're operating like we were last year. You know, no masks, freely open school, send them back to school right now, no matter what. That's what we describe as the blue code. There were 2 of those. There were also 18 that said essentially, we'd like to send them back now in a green. And it was also implied that all the ones that submitted the sports questions as well also wanted to go back presently in a green. And so if you add those together, that's 55 that said really they think we're in a green now, we should start with the green code now. There were also 5 submissions that were in a yellow code. That's kind of a hybrid, you know, going part-time during the week. There were 3 submitted that are in an orange, which is essentially nobody's going live except for kind of those that absolutely must. And then there were 4 submissions by folks in the red category suggesting that right now we should not be talking about live instruction at all. And that's really a summary of the questions. I don't expect any questions because I think everybody in the room here had access to those questions and read the same things I read. So
Thanks, Bryce. I think also, just let everybody know in the public that we all did, you know, I can speak for myself and most of the members in here, I know on specific that we did read them, we did consider them, and we do thank you for sending them in. And I think you'll hear tonight from each presenter response type answers to some of your questions, hopefully. And of course, if you still have them, I believe the link is still live, Dr. Cascade?
Yes.
Okay, so the link is still live, and hopefully a lot of those questions will be answered tonight the best we can. Okay, now we have a statement from the BEA-BESS. Is that coming from the video?
Come from the people on the Google Meet.
Okay. Sue, you are live.
Okay, it's my turn. I'm Sue Priebus. I'm a teacher at Bow Memorial School, and I'm also the president of the Bow Education Association. Joanne Heath is also here tonight with us, and I would invite her to introduce herself before I start giving a statement if she would like.
I'm here. I'm Joanne Heath, and I'm the technology assistant at Bow Memorial School, and I've stepped back into president of BESS for the year. So here I am.
After how many years, Joanne?
28 years at Bow Memorial School, and now going on 16 years being BESS president.
Well, we're happy to have you. Okay, so Joanne and I together, I have the bulk, and please forgive me for reading the statement. There's a lot in this statement and things that I want to make sure not to forget. It also is some really important things that we want to make sure that the teachers and the support staff get our ideas across about, and I don't want to forget anything, and I'm a little nervous, so please forgive me if I read more than I just address you. So I appreciate the opportunity to again address you on behalf of the Bow Education and Educational Support Staff Associations. I'll begin by saying we all want the same thing, and that is to develop a plan to safely and effectively educate our students. I mean, there could be no clearer message, I think, from anyone here that that's what we want. We appreciate everyone's hard work, and we know how much work has gone into this plan and just trying to do the right thing. I'll start by saying that a reopening task force was created for SAU 67. I was a part of that task force. It included 45 people. Community members, nurses, teachers from all 4 of our schools, support staff, administrators, school board members, and even our safety officer, of course. The task force had a stated purpose, and that was to provide research, information, and recommendations to SAU 67 decision makers and the community as a whole concerning reopening schools. Our understanding was that once this task force had made recommendations for a safe reopening plan, the recommendations would be presented to the community and also to the school district employees. A plan would then be adopted or modified by the school board. This task force met twice, once in May and again on July 15th. These meetings were informative and collaborative and much appreciated, but no recommendations were made, and we have not met again. I'm not sure if any more meetings are in process, and I think that that is yet to be seen. After that, a few months ago, the teachers and support staff began to work on a proposal to start conversations about the safe and effective reopening of our schools. It was a cohesive but working draft that we shared with Dr. Cascadden and had many, many productive, long conversations about this document. A few teachers had a 3.5-hour meeting with Dr. Cascadden and Marcy Kelly a while back to discuss what we believed were the doable and perhaps some of the undoable or unreasonable portions of our recommendations. We met today. A representative group of teachers and support staff members met today with members of administration and the Bow School Board. We assumed that we would further discuss the recommendations that we had been working so hard on, and then hear the Bow Board's ideas for a reopening plan. At that meeting, our document was not specifically addressed today, and instead we were told that the board's attorney would be putting together a new document to be shared with the teachers no later than Monday. We certainly look forward to seeing that, and we have been assured that it will be a very good, easy to work with document, which we are very hopeful about. However, we do feel now at this late date, we're kind of back to square one on asking that our voices be heard. The Bow teachers and the support staff feel the safest plan to reopen would be to open in orange. But at the very least, we are hoping that we go with a cautious yellow plan. We are trying to mitigate a very real danger. We are not being alarmists, and we are not being Chicken Littles and crying that the sky is falling. We have legitimate concerns for our safety following the potential and very likely rise in cases after a number of large New Hampshire gatherings in the coming weeks and Labor Day gatherings all over the place. We will have your children in our care in close proximity and somewhat confined spaces for approximately 7 hours a day. This is not the same exposure danger that a gas station employee or a restaurant server faces. We are concerned about the emotional, psychological, and physical consequences to the children of being in these conditions. We do not believe that asking teachers to instruct in person and remote students simultaneously is fair to either group of learners, and would ask that our hybrid model be rethought on that stance. We believe that a gradual entrance back into the schools is better and safer. We can be mindful and responsive to changing needs. However, it is a far better idea to realize the risk has lessened, breathe a sigh of relief, and move to a less restrictive environment than it is to realize that we have rising numbers of COVID victims and have to quickly and perhaps tragically move to a more restrictive plan. We know teachers are not the only ones being asked to work in uncertain times, of course, and that the COVID situation has created a multitude of hardships for families everywhere. We are ready to work. We are not asking to not work. And our instinct is to hold ourselves to the rigorous standards that our Bow community expects of us and that we frankly expect of ourselves. We have shown that we can teach remotely and did so in the spring with only one day to prepare for the new reality. We know that there are areas for improvement, and we are committed to building on our good work from the spring to make the remote model, when we need to use it, better and stronger and more responsive than before. We fully realize and respect that the school board has the ultimate right and responsibility to determine our reopening plan. And we don't take that lightly, and we appreciate them for that. However, regardless of tonight's vote, real and specific data from both families and employees will still need to be considered, and the plan may need to be adapted. Thank you for your time. Joanne, do you have anything you want to?
Yep. I just wanted to add that, after several meetings and meeting with Sue, I just came back into this blindsided like a week ago. So I just kind of really had no idea what was going on. But after several meetings, I really agree with Sue 100% that after speaking to some of my staff, that I think we go slower before we go faster for the safety of everyone. And some of my support staff has also asked me to ask you on behalf of them for their safety, that they do not go from one grade to another during the day, that they be assigned to a specific grade so that they are not from one end of the building to the other, for their safety and for everyone's safety. Sue said it all, and I have no more to say, but I just say you take this under consideration because we all feel this way and we're all in it for the kids. And I believe they need to be back in school and we need to be back in school. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Sue and Joanne. I think what we'll do on each item here, I should have mentioned this before, members of the board, we'll just have a opening if anyone has any discussion after each item. If we don't, we'll move to the next. Not sure we have a discussion on this at this time. Okay. Principal reports. We'll start with Mr. Harrington. You are live. Are you ready?
Good evening. How's everyone doing? Great. I apologize for the location. It's the quietest place in the house is the basement, so it looks a little strange, but it is what it is. So with Dunbarton Elementary School, I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to all the parents that responded to the survey. Thank you as well for all the questions to clarify so that they can make sure that they made the right choice for themselves. And just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that in the last presentation that I gave, it wasn't terribly clear where we were as a school as to what our plan was going to be. And we did meet with teachers and go over it. And the structure will stay pretty similar team-wise as it was last year, but the hybrid learning plan will be our focus. So with that said, our numbers are pretty clear. Families are ready for their students to go back to school. And if we were to look at the green data, I think that's actually going to tell us the most information. And that's telling us that we're close to 90% of the families would like their children back in school. And if you look at our class sizes, which is true to what Dunbarton is, they vary based on the grade, but the most, grade 3 is the most with 7 students going remote if we were at level green. And you look at some of those class sizes, we have close to 20 in 2 grade levels. So it kind of begs the question, how do we handle staff members that go remote? And that gets very interesting because there's a couple different philosophies out there that if you have remote teachers, they can take all the remote students. In a school like Dunbarton, that's just not easily done. We would be looking at K-3, taking 16 students and 1 teacher, teaching 4 grade levels with 16 students. That's a really heavy lift. And same thing, 4 through 6, there would be about 10 students.
Oh, and
So,
one question. On
Yep.
the chart, on the table you have with the plus minus 13, 14, we're multiplying those by 2?
Correct.
Okay, just so everyone knows.
Yep. And so what we were looking at doing is if a teacher's remote, we would be looking at them at a specific grade level with a staff member in that classroom overseeing and making sure that students are on task and following the schedule of the hybrid learning plan that we have in place. And that seems to make the most sense, but it depends on where the teacher who determines she needs to go remote, what grade level that person is in. It's my belief that if they're at a grade level that has a really high class size, we may be looking at shifting some teachers around. So that will happen later on down the line if that's where we need to go, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that. But other than that, I think that this hybrid learning plan makes a lot of sense for what we're looking at with families that really clearly want their students to go back to school. And it'll work well when we have students that need to go in and out of school for quarantining and such and need to stay within their class. So that's where we're at this point, unless anybody has any specific questions.
Okay. I'm hearing none. Owen?
Actually, yeah, I just want to quickly, Nicole Sloan, Dunbarton School Board. Hi, Owen.
Hi, Nicole. How are you?
Good. I just wanted to address for those families who start off remote, if they do see that, let's say in a perfect world, everything is going very smoothly, and then they, let's say October 10th or something, want to come back into the school, is that an option for them?
I think with this hybrid learning plan, that's the beauty of it, is that you can go in and out of it hybrid or, remote or in person. So yes, and that's been my response to families that have that same question. It makes sense that you can come right back into in person, or if for some reason you decide you wanted to go remote, that's better for your family at that point in time, you could do so.
Thank you, Nicole. That was actually thoughtful to bring that up. I forgot about that point. Thanks, Owen.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, Lori Kruger, BES. There she is.
Good evening. I have some data that will be updated as I speak to you on these slides. I'd like to thank the both parents when I sent a little email today to see if I could get a few more responses. It was a great success, so I now feel I have numbers that reflect 90% of our Bow Elementary community. So with 482 people responding, in yellow, we still stay at 78% preferring to come in, 27% remaining in remote learning for that. If you could go to the next slide, please. In green is where the numbers change. What did change is the percentage stays the same. That's roughly 80 and 20%. 80% coming in, 20% going remote. However, as we sat here this evening, I retallied based on that because there were about 50 more responses since I stepped out between the meeting and the end of the workday. In kindergarten, we have 54 people who will come in, and that's around 11 children per classroom. There are 5 classrooms. In first grade, we now have 84 who would like to come in. There are 6 classrooms, that is 14 per classroom. In second grade, 82 people have stated a preference for coming in, that is 17 per classroom. That's a challenge. There are 5 classrooms. In third grade, there are 80 children coming in, 16 in a classroom, once again a challenge. And in fourth grade, 75 students coming in, 15 per classroom. The challenge I mentioned is because at BES, our classrooms tend to be smaller than the average elementary school. We are roughly at 825 square feet, and as most of you have been in, the bulk of our building are rooms that are not square and have more than 4 walls. So fitting that in, we are also, as is most of Bow, a school district of tables. We're looking for our tables to fit in a manner to also have room, particularly when we think of K-1, that children can have area to be on the floor, to do other learning while they're distanced, but that they're not in their seats all day. I'd like to really put a shout out to our local Cub Scouts who have made a phenomenally generous offer to make clear dividers. They're not quite plexiglass, they're a really solid plastic that Carbono has been in. He and I have put them on the tables, checked out all our sizes, made a few tweaks. The knowledge that perhaps a child may someday be able to put a pencil through it if they really tried. And I love children, but out of 500, I think a few might. So we'll have some extra to fix that, which will be easy. But this is another area of protection so that when we're doing different things, we're moving around, we're taking mask breaks, we have another layer for our kids and our children. And to the families who have contributed to that, thank you very much. And I appreciate also that the Cub Scouts are having their children be a part of our process as a community during these times. So those are our new numbers. Just have them tonight. I'll be going in the building tomorrow and the beginning of the week to see what that looks like in a classroom. When I wrote to parents, I said that perhaps, class assignments will change based on those numbers. I don't know yet how those numbers flesh out per room. So to take 4th grade as an example, I have 75 children coming in. I said it's 15 per room, but based on the current class list, I don't know if some rooms have 15 coming in. That would be amazing. But I'm going to guess there has to be some movement around so that we know that when kids are in. Conversely, 2nd grade has a lot of people who are choosing to come in. I may need to look where numbers are smaller and do some adjustment. I've had these conversations with staff by sharing with them all the possibilities. In the month of July, staff were given an opportunity to either do a Google Meet, phone call, or email with me, to which they readily took available to. I appreciated those times. We did a lot of Google Meets through that. And at the end of July, I just offered an opportunity for us as a certified staff to have a conversation. And our conversations has really been about, I don't have a lot of specific answers. Getting the numbers helps us to have specific answers to support the work that we'll do together. To the next slide goes to more of the work that our staff will be doing. And this is it's a mock schedule. It's a draft, it's a first go around. Our staff has been working last week and this week through professional development to learn our new platform of Seesaw for grades K through 2. We just finished 2 days for our new math program, Bridges Mathematics. That is a company that we're pretty excited we went with, particularly when we were done. They set up pacing guides for us. They take into account, as we were in this country, not in school for the last third of the last year. And they have a lot of tools to make the remote learning interactive. These are tools that our children who are in school will also learn. If we go to yellow, if we go to orange, children have an opportunity to learn those tools and have them available once they are home. And they're good tools to have in school as well. What we're trying to show you with this schedule is whether you're in class or remote, the learning is the same. What's really different as a parent, it is going to take us a decent amount of time to come into school in BES and any school and to leave. That will take time away in the morning from when we started because we'll be coming in slower and we'll be leaving a little bit earlier. The transportation company and I met today and I think we came up with a plan that's really going to work. And really what that is to have our buses not there when parents are doing pickup and drop off. For all of you who've ever been in the pickup and drive up line at BES, I'm sure that's really exciting. In the morning, that would mean that the buses come first, by and large, drop off, which then opens up the bus loop where we will have parents come through. You'll still have the double lines out to Bow Center Road, but hopefully this will keep us off Bow Center Road and children can come in. Conversely, at the end of the day, bus students will get out first. They will leave at 2 o'clock, and after the buses are gone, the cars will be able to then leave those 2 double lines and start to come through the bus loop. In addition, parent pickup has a new practice where with your phones, and this is free to us this year, which is nice. Basically, it's an app. You're in the bus loop. You're letting us know we've got another computer. Your child will be coming out of their classroom to get in the car. We typically have held our children in the gym to then get out to cars. That was a group of 85. In looking at the surveys, most of you have chosen for transportation to pick up and drop off. We can't put that large in there. So I feel this will work. It will take a lot of training on our part, but we've done it before. We know we can do it again. So that will also affect our day. In this schedule, I have not yet allotted for the time when children will need to travel to either pick up a lunch for the older kids, we will be delivering it to the younger kids, and the time in and outside for recess.
Lori, can I just ask one point of clarification?
Sure.
And I think this is an overall theme for the meeting.
Mhm.
When we, for this meeting in this district, are speaking of hybrid schedule,
Mhm.
we're not like other districts who are saying hybrid, or you're in 2 days,
Mhm.
home 2 days. This is hybrid where no matter if you're remote or in class, it's going to be following the same schedule. So it's a different feel for remote than other districts might be looking
Right.
at.
And absolutely. And so also when the teachers are back for those days in August, when we look at this schedule, it works whether we're in or remote, when we're doing in tandem, when we're doing all or one. So that's really our intention.
Can I ask a quick point of clarification
Sure.
on this as well? So in the middle where it says one grade level teacher will provide a live mini lesson, for example, in the blue core subject areas, is that for in class or remote, or are you splitting it up and saying one teacher is teaching a remote mini lesson and the other teacher is teaching all the rest of the students in that class?
It's a good question. When we go to work on this together, I'm going to give an example that went well during remote last year. Our first grade team divided up their work in their Google Classroom. They did one first grade Google Classroom, and everyone had a subject. And so that also, and they also did individual things for their classroom. But they took the core part of school, and someone did math, someone did reading, someone did writing, someone did foundations, and there were a couple other things, and I can't remember. So they would do that. So when it was foundations time, you're a first grader, you go in, and Mrs. Rader was doing foundations. But you were still, even if you were in the Turleteers, had things that the Turleteers did for their class individually. So sort of trying to take what happened there and make it so. What I'm concerned about with the technology, which was next on my piece to talk about, when we did one of our PD offerings this week with the teachers for Seesaw, some of us were in school and some of us were remote. And we were in a classroom and we're using one of our interactive panels. It wasn't smooth. And so we were all adults, hypothetically with a lot of patience. I'm going to say I'm not always that patient person. And there were a fair amount of glitches in being able to hear and being able to see. And this was presented by our most knowledgeable digital people in the building who are very good. There were just pieces, because we hadn't done it before, we're not used to doing that we realized we need to tweak further. We may need some more pieces to have. So one of the pieces that came up in that conversation is if everyone had on headphones, home and in school when it was happening, with the mic, the feedback's gone. I think, because I'm not really strong technology, but that was one of the recommendations that works for that. So I'm trying to create something that's smooth and also to respect the fact it's just not a matter in the elementary school of its morning meeting and the kids who are in the class are there and the kids who are home come in to pay attention. That's hard for a 5-year-old. That's a hard management piece if you're a teacher. And so some of those things may work better for our middle and high school colleagues that are going to be a different challenge for us in putting together the hybrid model of both, where we're coming together for both remote and in school. And so those are still some pieces that we're working on. And honestly, we could be working on it as we go into the month of September and through and find there are things we have to do. I think it's been said, this year is about flexibility and adaptability until we get it right. We know what parts worked for remote learning as teachers and parents, and we know what parts we want to fix. And that's short. But the actual fixing of them sometimes comes with some other pieces that we may not yet have the tool for.
A quick question regarding the bus arriving car drop-off portion. I like the idea of having an app that, like, pickup control, whatever it's called, that you could have it use as a signal beacon, which would be great if we would have cell phone reception at the elementary school. Like, I could not use my cell phone to tell you, hey, I'm here to pick up my daughter. So we may have to use technology that doesn't.
And that's a good thing. So Roy and Amy Forbes, that is their project starting on Monday.
What are they going to do?
Extender.
Yeah.
Extender?
I don't know.
I don't know, so when I walk out, I have like walked out the whole line and not a parent has seen me because while they're waiting for the pickup and if I go out early, everyone's like this. So somehow something works there. So I'm just gonna say, I have noticed that, sometimes, you scare people. You go up and you're like, hi, your turn. So, yeah, you're right, I agree with you because even when I'm in the parking lot, I'm like, oh no, wait till I get in the building. But that is something that, they're thinking of.
A couple questions, and one of them, you're just the guinea pig because you're up there. So this is really a standard question for all of
I'll be
us.
sitting behind the lid.
But
Right behind you.
if my math is right on your numbers, if 20% were to go remote, wouldn't that be essentially 15 kids per grade, which would essentially be a teacher? Is there an opportunity to not have to have somebody teach in class and remote, and instead just peel off an entire class of remote?
That's a great question. So I thought that. And I think a lot of us thought that. I think the teachers and I, that was something we thought of. The piece about also remote is think about the reasons also that could go remote that are different than your level of green, yellow, orange. Is that perhaps a teacher or a child may need to go remote because they showed symptoms and they need to wait for a test. And so when they go remote, if they're in a classroom, do they then jump over to the remote teachers? And then back and forth. I think if you're in kindergarten or first grade, that'd be really hard. And maybe I don't know. Those are some things to
Still be worked out, sounds like. I mean, I guess if you had hand and fire from 15 parents in one grade that said, we're not coming back no matter what, you're locked in, you would have that knowledge, which is probably unlikely.
And I think the other piece is just as when I've had opportunities to talk with staff and when parents, so sometimes I'll get a long email and I go, I think it's easier if we talk. But one of the bigger things that happens, and we saw it also in the back to school replies, and also to parents who reached out to me separately, is they go, here's how I feel right now. I don't know how I'm going to feel in six weeks. I don't know how I'm going to feel here. And it goes both ways. Some people want to start remote and feel good I come in, and there's people who are coming in and they go, I could change my mind. And I think if we think about the last 6 months for all of us and going in or out in our own comfort level and our families and our loved ones and our friends' jobs and watching those different pieces, there's a different level of comfort in the situation we're in. So what felt like, okay, I've got 5 classes, 1 will be remote and 4 will be in and I'll do it that way. I don't know that it's that clean. It's different than if I'm at the high school and I'm not going to speak for Brian, but I'm going to say some things he does. There's a time where he can just say, these are the classes that are going to be remote due to whatever things, and that's how it is. Whereas we're one whole day. So the pluses and minuses that he has to go through because it's by courses are different than at the elementary school where they're all day. Yeah.
So,
Also, I think as all of us pick the brains of our colleagues in other districts going, what are you doing? How does that work?
yeah. So my other question, which I think is applicable to all 4 schools essentially. So my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong in this, so you have a math class at 8:30 to 9:30, and the teacher is going to teach that class, whether we're in blue or in red, it's going to be 8:30 to 9:30, whether it's remote or live for the rest of the school year, right? Start with that. So let's assume we start in the green setting. You've got remote students and in class. My expectation is, so that teacher starts with math. They're at a whiteboard of some sort. They're just doing addition, 2 + 2 on the whiteboard or what have you. They do that exercise for, say, 15 minutes of the class while the whole class is watching. There's a camera essentially in the back of the classroom. Or
I don't have a camera in the back of the classroom. All I
there's
have
something
is on
that's
the
taping them
screen.
so that the remote student is also watching
Right.
from 8:30 to 8:45, right?
Yeah.
And so then at 8:45, the teacher says, okay, everybody do independent work and here's some practice problems to work on. I'm going to get with this group of 3 or 4 students over here. Let's see if we can work on this project here. At some point, they go over to their computer, I guess, and say to the remote students, hey, does anyone have any questions or can we work through a problem? And that's essentially how it's going to go. That's our expectation.
So in my expectation, a remote child is not going to be on live for an hour. It would probably be for what I would consider the mini lesson. So the teacher starts with their 15-minute mini lesson. They go, the kids then are in, the screen would then go off for the remote kids, and they have through either Seesaw or Google Docs their assignments that they would work in independently.
Why?
The teacher through those.
Why wouldn't they just stay on and do the same thing? The teacher would just say to them at some point, just like
So
them
we
in class,
also
just say,
need,
hey,
with young children, we need the parents to be available. And so a parent would have to be available for all that time. And they've shared with me they're not. Some parents will not be able to follow this schedule because they have, even though they're choosing remote, they're at home working remotely, and they're going to do some of this after our school hours. And so there has to be a flexibility. Not everyone who's remote will click into the live lessons.
That what they use the state program for?
Canvas?
Would it be that?
Oh, VLAX is different. I can go to that next. So that's a good question. I actually was on the phone with VLAX. Well, I was in a Google Meet. I was on a meeting with VLAX today. So VLAX is entirely separate. If you choose to do that, when you go in, you're going to register your case. So for the elementary school, you go in, you set up an appointment, and you register. So I'm going to use an example I know where the child's registering for ELA, English Language Arts, and Math. They're all set and they're registered. Once you're registered, you're waiting for VLAX to contact you for your initial meeting. That teacher, and at the elementary level, that teacher will be the same for all subjects. Whereas if I'm middle or high, it's specific to my core topic. They'll set up a time. Once they set that up, in VLAX, the kids, when they're ready, would go in with their parents, and there's modules that they click on. And in those modules, there's lessons that are presented, and then work they would do. The teacher, who's the VLAX teacher, would then check in later on those lessons. So even in VLAX, it's not as if I'm going on in half an hour a day, that teacher and I are having a live exchange. They come back and do check-ins. They're making sure that they would set up a piece. So if I'm going in and I say I'm going to do math at 3rd grade with my child, with that teacher, I'm deciding, are they going to do 2 lessons a week? Are they going to do 5 lessons a week? Are they going to do 8 lessons a week? You set that, and it has to go. If you're not doing the work every week, they will be in touch with you, and I know this from my work prior, you're out. So they have to keep that up. The other thing about VLAX currently is they're in the process of hiring teachers. They are hiring New Hampshire certified or certifiable teachers. They need up to 50 more. They have, I know today she said they were starting to do an induction with 15 new teachers. So through remote learning in this time, for teachers. I don't say that to say don't do it. It's just a realistic expectation that for some courses, it could be a 2 to 4 week to 6 week wait to get that started. So if someone's doing VLAX, they're doing VLAX. But if you're doing VLAX math, you're not doing Bo math.
But if you're doing normal math, it just like I said, the green settle like that. And let's say massive outbreak, everything's shut down, everyone's in red. So then people will be at home at 8:30 and they'll do math. And the teacher
And
may
then
have a
it'll be
kitchen
set.
table and they're got a whiteboard at the table, but and then they're going to do reading at 10:30, like a regular school year.
And part of it also, Bryce, is it can be an interactive, but we're also aware of how long we want to put on the screen. And I do think it's different for the older kids, although I even just know from my own family, with someone who is much older and now heading into a college to do it remotely, they miss people. And the screen's feeling a lot. So definitely for particularly our youngest kids, concerned about that balance of screen time.
I have a question about that screen time.
Mhm.
You mentioned that there's a mini lesson, and then the kids at home break off to do their own work. Is that work not on a screen then?
It's on their program. So if think of Google Docs, there were assignments the kids have, they would go to their assignments.
So,
Yeah.
so that's still screen time? It sounds like we're going from screen time
Right,
to screen time.
it's screen time to screen time, because although we have two options, and we do have two programs in math that in BES that will come with a hand workbook. I don't know that I've ever been excited about a workbook in my career until now, but the math program comes with workbooks, so that'll be paper pencil, and for K through 2, our handwriting is paper pencil. We're also thinking of how to get journals home to kids so that their writing's in journals and not just my writing. I know our music teacher has created kits that will be with the remote kids and the in-school kids for instrument making. Our teachers doing something. So. And I think that was, I just looked, I believe I got all my notes, but I, just as Dean Embrace had said, it's very heartwarming. People write and say, thank us for our effort. It is a group effort, and I appreciate
Owen, back to you. One question, if you're still there after Lori presented. What were your numbers on the busing situation in Dunbarton? Did you get similar feedback, mostly drop off?
Yeah, it looks like the drop off has increased, so we do have to change the way that we're doing that because we don't want the backup on Robert Rogers. So we're going to be dropping off at the recess door, and it's similar to what Lori had spoken to, in that they're just going to have to go to the classroom and not congregate where they normally do, because we can't do that anymore. We have to cohort the students, and we'll plan through how to best manage that as well. And based on what you heard from Lori, I don't know if that prompted other questions for DES or not.
No, it seems like a similar. Did you have anything different than the typical day in Bow?
No, we actually talked about that today, and we kept it as a sample elementary schedule. The only difference would be some slight adjustments in time for start time and end time. But like Lori said, we'd also be using technology more, and we would also have Seesaw K-3, and then Google Classroom above. I'm sorry, K-2, and then Google Classroom above that, and just leaning on technology a little bit more than normal, and using that both remote and for in-person. And
the sketchiness of the service in Dunbarton is similar to BES, so I guess the Roy's going to have another challenge there with the app, if that's employed.
Oh, we'll be good. No worries.
Okay. All right, Adam.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone out there in the internet world. Definitely have some data to share, much like Lori and Owen have referenced. Data's been updated. The data you see on the slides was current at around 4, so it's a few hours old, and we've had several more people respond. But the percentages have stayed about the same. So as I run through the different data, I think the percentages are still accurate and good, even though the total numbers have increased. They kind of increased in proportion. For yellow, we have had about 83% of our folks, our families, responded. I feel comfortable having my child come back to BMS in a yellow situation. That's a helpful number to plan around. So 83% for yellow, and if we could just advance the slide. For green, which is what we developed that schedule for and pushed out last week, the number is actually quite a bit higher. I was a little surprised at how high our green percentage was. It's actually most recently, in the most updated numbers, it was at 88%, 87.9. So it's the BMS community, they're anxious to come back. I direct you to the table for a minute. In 5th grade, at 88% coming back, we'd be looking at class sizes of approximately 16. Might have one of 15. At 6th grade, the class itself is a little bit bigger, but we would wind up with classes of 17 and 18 at that grade level. 7th grade is definitely our squishiest class, and I'm going to dwell on 7th and 8th grade just for a minute because I want to explain that even though the averages say 19 and 18, that's going to take a lot of customizing, and it's what Bryce had hinted at last week, and Doug and I are very well aware of. It has to do with the cohort. Because in 7th grade and 8th grade, we have to cohort around electives if we're going to really keep those kids together. And so I know we have a topic at the end of the meeting to discuss. Well, what happens could there be ripple effects to cohorts that could cause, additional impacts? So I put that out there not as anything scary or anything along those lines, but just something to be aware of and factor into the back of your minds. In 7th grade or 8th grade, it could really very, very reasonably be that I have a cohort of 17 in one section, but we could have a section where it's 21, even if we are at 88%. And will probably sound very familiar to some of the folks who've had kids go through the middle school, particularly 7th, 8th grade. Over the years, there'll always be like the algebra class that has more kids in it, that type of thing.
You'd still have enough space for a classroom of 21.
Well, that's actually one of the hints I was hoping to drop during this meeting, not in a negative again or scary way, but just one of my concerns that I'm looking at, that I want to be very, very aware of, is furniture. I think we have square footage to do 3 feet apart with a mask. Do we have the appropriate furniture to do that? Because we've moved in a collaborative direction over the last, purposely. I mean, this is what we wanted to do, where we've purchased tables, which are really great for 21st century learning. That's what you want. But for COVID, you kind of want what Brian has set up in the high school here with those smaller desks. So I may come back to the board later in August and say, this might be one of those community asks. Could we ask if people have a spare individual student desk? We can table that for now, but I put that just so that it's kind of out there. You can think about it down the road. If we could go to the next slide. They really want into this, which is great. I say, let them in. This slide is included. I didn't include a slide this week with regard to the whole schedule because I did that last week and I went through it. But this slide, I thought, in speaking with Shannon, it might be helpful because I've had a number of conversations with parents this week, and they've been great. Much like Laura, you get an email, and that email contains a lot of really good questions. They're all valid. They're all really good questions. People trying to figure it out. What's the best fit for my family? And in each of those conversations, I found myself going through this scenario with parents, and parents really want to know, okay, if my child goes remote, what does it look like? Like, is it going to be a full remote class? For instance, a couple of minutes ago, you asked Lori about could she make remote sections and have those functions. On the surface, the answer would be that's so intuitive. That's a yes, like it makes sense. The challenge becomes when the ripple effects of it, like do we move orange? Then what happens to those remote sections or the quarantining? So I think what she was hinting at, it makes tons of sense. So I received the question several times this week, what does it look like if my child is remote in a hybrid class? And the way I've tried to explain it to folks, to parents, is regardless of color, regardless of whether your child is remote or in person, class is class. Class is class. You're just going to be in your class at 8:40. So if you're remote, you log in. And I tried to explain to parents, we're going to really use specific language around this. And one of the pieces of vocabulary we're trying to really introduce is seminar. Seminar is almost synonymous with direct instruction. So every class should really begin with an opening seminar. And that is what is present in that table you'll see. So if your student is remote, they would log in and they'd be a part of that opening seminar. But that opening seminar really is when attendance is going to get taken, it's when the teacher is going to set up the lesson for the day. And what I've explained to some parents is when I was teaching, which believe it or not, 15 years ago now, so it seems a little crazy to say that was when I was in the classroom, but I used to use the whiteboard as my learning platform. That's what it was. And up in one corner, I might have my homework and my assignments the kids were going to go home and do, and the other corner, I might have had the day's agenda. We're going to do these 3 things today, kids, and the kids would be oriented to it. They would know what the learning platform was. Now, the learning platform is really going to be Google Classroom. That's got to be that common space. So whether Bryce is in person in front of me and Clem is remote, you have the same learning platform. And the activities for the day and the agenda for the day are loaded there. Once the teacher moves out of that opening seminar, which may only be 10 minutes, it may be less than that, they're going to move into that workshop time. So we talked a little bit about the workshop model. That really is a time-tested strategy. Teachers and coaches have used workshop model for decades. It's a good instructional pedagogical system. So you may have some choice initially in your workshop model, or the teacher may direct you, like, for instance, Jared, I need you to work on assignment 1. Bryce, can you please start with the vocabulary activity, whatever it is, but you're going to workshop and create that space in your class. But at some point, because we've extended the length of the classes, and we've really done this by design, we think moving to longer classes is going to do a variety of things, from reducing transitions in the building, which is helpful, to creating a longer, larger instructional block for students. They'll come back to some midpoints seminar type situation, which is sort of the mini lesson Lori was alluding to earlier. We then potentially have another cycle out to a different workshop time, which you'd then be presumably working on the other instructional pieces for the day, the other parts of the agenda. And hopefully to close, you have some form of formative assessment, a check-in at the end, call it a mini seminar, whatever you want to say. So teachers are able to check in with those kids again at the end of the class before they go. Sometimes teachers refer to that as like an exit ticket or an exit card, or you're doing some activity, check for understanding at the end. So I thought it might be helpful just to have a little visual, a little schema of what that instructional model might look like in practice. I just thought it might be the time to share that both here and also for parents who have questions out in the community. Other than that, I should touch on transportation because I have that data as well.
We have many members of the community, Adam, that want to watch how this is going to unfold at the middle school.
Well, I hope it's not just the middle school, I don't think. I think this is the instructional model that's being talked about across the district, is right? Hope and understand it.
No, I mean about the drop-off. You said transportation.
Oh, gotcha. You had me scared for a minute. Like, no, this isn't just the middle school. This is
Transportation
This is everybody.
at the middle school.
Transportation, actually, arrival, with the rolling arrival, we have 65% of our families that have said they're willing to drop off. That's great. That really is. That's good. That's helpful. But we have I think we're set up better for the morning than we are really for the PM. The PM makes me a little bit more nervous. Each school is going to have their specific challenges. 15-minute rolling arrival from 8:15 to 8:30. I feel like that's a good starting place. We may have to tweak. I'm not suggesting that, hey, everything is solved.
That's after elementary school, right?
It is. It is. The morning we're lucky in the morning in that we're the last school to start. It's always good busing runs. 65% of our parents will drive.
Can I ask a question about, I guess it was both you and Lori, but I've really done minimal drop-off at the elementary school and middle school personally, but I hear how it's a nightmare. What is the nightmare? Is it getting onto the main road or off the main road, or is it the kids actually coming out of the school to get to the car? Like, what is it that makes it such a nightmare?
I think it's probably harder at the elementary school, if I had to guess. For the middle school, and Jen, you've picked up many times because we've seen each other there. I think the hardest part for the middle school is really pick up on the other. It's the PM. The AM, I have not heard complaints about AM, but I could be
But I
wrong.
think that's because, like, I drop Jake off every day, pretty much on my way to work, but I could drop him off at 8 o'clock, you know?
Yep.
I think the start time for middle school, you could drive, they had a club that they were going to, or like kids do council, I had to get in there.
Yep.
Or he would take the elementary school bus, but even the drop off was so staggered between
Right,
8
it's
and
like more
8:30 that it was never super crowded. I think when we're paring it down to 8
Yeah.
and 8:30, it will be a little more congested.
I think you're right.
I think it'll be okay, but
I think
it
you're
will
right,
be
Jenna.
okay.
My question, it's a loaded question. I mean, where I grew up in Wisconsin, our high school had a police officer who would be at the corner that didn't have a traffic light or stop signs, only during the school times, and they would manage the traffic flow. Is that something that would be helpful if we have the police involved?
In the afternoon, it might. So when you pose your question, I'm still more optimistic about the AM. I do think we're going to have more of a bottleneck, but I think the AM should be okay. Because drop off by middle school, I think everything's just a little quicker. They're older, they can get out of the car. There's going to be a few kids who have anxiety issues who may not want to get out of the car, and that happens every year. But usually that's after the school day begins anyway, to be honest. PM, I am worried about. PM, we have 60% of our parents saying they can pick up, which I was flattened by that number, because 60% at 3:30, that is in the middle of the workday. Like, I was like, that's good.
There's no place to put the cars.
I am worried about
There's
that.
absolutely no place to put the cars. And then when the cars are, the kids are trying to cross.
Yeah.
My child almost got hit 3 times last year, by nobody's fault, it's just, it's like progress going in and out of there.
Yeah, and sometimes kids will take off too, which makes it harder. There's two part train to that. There's the adult part and the student part. You gotta slow down. I am more worried about PM. I think we have to do a lot more thinking around that. It could even be like a staggered dismissal where, and you can't stagger dismissal by grade level like we do for buses. Like for me to dismiss all the 5th graders first won't work, because you might have a 5th grader and a 7th grader. 7th grader's in the second wave. So I really have to make the dismissal happen almost by alpha, so you're getting families out. So when you show up for preventing, yeah, you just gotta.
So forgive me because I'm not in the local school, but I know early on in like one of the task force meetings, it was talked about using different entrances and exits. Would that help? If you had some kids go back?
It's a really great question. It wouldn't, because of the structure of where we do pickup, unless we change things. And Doug and I did talk about this a little bit. Where that could work, and Nicole, it's a good question, is if we shifted so that we were doing parent pickup from a couple of locations and we didn't dismiss students for drop-off until after the BO buses ran. And if we did that, then we could begin to consider using the bus loop. So you can tell PM departure, I'm putting a lot of thought into. Say, oh, this is the answer. It just could look like more time, like a longer window. And then we bump into some of the same challenges that the elementary school has, where, previously I know you've used your big spaces, you've used your gym, you've used your cafeteria to house kids. Well, so we have to think through that.
Have you been in communication with the OPD on that? Are they they don't come in the afternoon, right? They're in the morning only?
I think shift change around 3.
So if you had someone out
Could be
there,
wrong.
if you had someone out there, maybe we need a traffic.
That could, the bigger problem, the traffic is a problem. But it's a symptom, it's a symptom of the volume.
It really
Now it's going to be
is.
double.
But you just can't park. What Jen said is the truth. It's because you can't get enough cars in, and then if you have 60% of 500 that's a big number of cars. I mean, granted, a lot of them are siblings. Well, and even if they're siblings, you're still probably at 250, I mean, it's a
The
lot
cars
of
are
cars.
big now. I mean, that may sound interesting, but I'm gonna say, just about everyone drives some sort of SUV. And so you put that many cars, the time children get in safely, that they put in the elementary school buckle up. So Tim and I do, we're traffic control.
Yeah.
And so are our teachers, and we're pretty smoothly operated. It's just gonna be at least double what we were used to. And I we're able to get into our bus loop, and that'll make a difference this year because of that. But it is volume.
All right, I don't
When we go on to
wanna
Bow Center Road.
I don't want to beat this one to death all night. Anything else for Adam?
Thank you, everybody.
Wade, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Keep you alive over there. How
I'm betting on sports.
are our busing contracts set up in the sense that if we're gonna have 60 and 80% of the kids being dropped off, we need to reevaluate at either district or obviously Dunbarton, I'm speaking for it.
I mean, so it's totally different kind of subjects.
Between two, yeah, just
Where
Dunbarton.
Bo has their own buses. We're gonna get everybody's data from each of the school buildings who needs transportation and match those up to bus routes. And what we're hoping is that we're going to be able to kind of reconfigure some things and put less students on buses just by the nature of who's going to need. And
To keep the number of buses, so there's more distance in the buses.
Right.
Okay.
And what we do want to do, and there were some questions that came in on the email, is we're ready to provide transportation as people come in and out of needing it, just like we have in the past, because things change. You know, a person's work schedule might change and they think they can drop their student off in the morning and now they can't. So when we know those things, we're still going to be able to go out and pick up. The big change for our drivers for both districts is going to be just like a lot of our classrooms, is very rigid seating charts. We really need to do that and stress that. So we have a driver meeting coming up on the 21st, where we're going to go over, these new kind of requirements.
Good. Okay. Brad? Sure.
All right, I'll start. Hi, everyone. Brian O'Connell, principal here at Bow High School. Kind of just an overview of our data. So I'm going to talk about the yellow and green kind of together. At the high school, we obviously don't necessarily have like grade level classes, so I'm going to kind of skip that piece like the other schools did. But our yellow data, this was a little earlier today, but I have updated numbers. We have about 71.4% of our students who would like to attend in person if we were in that yellow zone, and we have 89.4% of our students who would like to attend if we're in that kind of green area. That's with hearing from 478 of our students, which is roughly about 76% of our population here at the high school. So those numbers have stayed kind of consistent around that figure as we've been getting data here over the course of the last 3 or 4 days. So what this data is going to be very important for us. The next steps we can do is a few different things around our courses. We've been working on determining which courses we're going to call those online courses, which are going to meet exclusively remotely and online. We're going to talk with our teachers and our staff with those courses, make sure they're comfortable, the ones that we determined that are going to be in that kind of format. And then make sure everyone's on the same page with that, and kind of then start to roll those out and get those out to everyone so everyone understands. Likewise, we'll have schedule adjustments that we'll have to kind of go through with this process. When you look at how kids map out what classes they're taking, we have anywhere on a particular class, 0 to 4 students in that class who would be remote. In some instances, when we have 8 sections of a class, that could result in a remote section of that class. For example, for geometry, looking at it earlier today, we had exactly 20 students in geometry who, as of right now, would like to be remote. We offer 8 sections of geometry. It makes logical sense to make a remote section of that. The give or take of that is one of the things we want to do is be flexible with families and with students to be able to kind of, we were calling it learning status, but change whether they're remote or in person in that type of nature. So we want to be able to have that at different times throughout the school year that people can make that switch beyond just the need if something arises in their own personal life and their family life that we need to deal with instantaneously. So we'll have to kind of work through that and make sure we don't trip up as we make those adjustments to the schedules. But those are reasonable numbers. That's what we expected. And it's kind of right in line with what we were predicting. So that's a good sign for the work we have ahead of us. A big thing that I just want to stress, I saw this in a couple of questions we were getting high school-wise, is people asking if they can kind of go in and out depending on the class that they're taking. And obviously that's true at the high school. We do this under normal circumstances where we have kids take a mix of, in-person classes, VLAX classes, maybe they're taking a CRTC class. If they're a senior, maybe they're taking an early college class or an HTI or through MCC. So we just work with each individual kid. Our school counselors do a great job of really personalizing their schedules. So it's not foreign for us to have a kid who might be taking math and science here in the building, might be taking an English class, an elective English class online. Maybe they're taking a class here on HTI or something along those lines. We will work with every individual kid and family to make sure we can set up a schedule for them that's going to work for them. Likewise with CRTC, we got some questions in for that. Tried to put that in the message I sent the families home, but just to follow up. Students will be able to transport themselves to and from CRTC. If they have first block CRTC, they do not need to report to the high school first before going to Concord. They can just drive right to Concord. Concord's working on it, and we're obviously working with them. about the question about transferring other students. So if 3 kids were going to carpool together over to Concord, I think they're working on a format to make that work, and everyone on board with making sure cohort and group and crossing all of that type of stuff. Kind of part of that, but it looks like that's going to be a possibility for our kids, which should be helpful. We will still provide the buses though for students who need to take the bus over to CRTC. Just as usual, we have our Block A buses and then our Block B buses. For just in general, just a thing, we have been starting to move classes over to different classrooms. So student schedules, if they've seen them already, you might have a different room when we actually arrive. As we see now these numbers shake out, if we see a class that's still on a little bit of a bigger side, we might shift it to a bigger classroom, and likewise, if we have classes smaller, we're shifting it to a smaller classroom. So we can kind of, our goal is 6 feet. I mean, we do deal with 3 feet minimum in some of the classes that we're at, but we're going to try and space kids out as much as possible, and that will involve adjusting some kind of classes around. And transportation in general, according to our data, about 2/3 of the students will utilize that kind of open campus, which again is kind of the number we're expecting. It's very high for the 11th and 12th graders, and as you get with younger grades, it's less and less. For those students reported they would have their own vehicle. About 1/3 can rely on family or other transportation to come and go. And then about 1/3 of the students, it was actually almost exactly third, would like to stay in the building during that time. Just another clarity, because I got this question a couple of times. That doesn't mean you're only locked into that option. Like if you're a student and you have a need to stay, and you typically leave during your free time and you need to stay and work with a teacher on something along those lines, of course you can stay and do that. We wouldn't push you out or anything like that. Likewise, if we have a student who's reporting that they're staying at the beginning of the year, something changes, they get a license or they're able to get transportation, of course they can access that kind of open campus as kind of the year kind of progresses. The last thing I want to do is to move on to that next slide, which is kind of a sample schedule, as you've kind of seen from the other levels. So this is just a kind of a sample 10th grade schedule using kind of real classes, seeing how it works with kind of staggered time and that kind of hybrid approach. So this is just 4 of the classes because we run a block schedule if you're not familiar with it. So this would be an odd day for the student. An even day, they would have a different set of classes, math class, maybe English elective, best class, something along those lines. So the day starts off, this is that kind of seminar workshop. They might be in their American World class and do kind of a 20-minute overview of a text that they're reading. They may even take a 10-minute silent reading time as part of that. And that's something that it doesn't matter if you're present in the classroom or you're present at home, just kind of tuned into the class. You can participate in that reading kind of as that kind of opening part. It's kind of unfolding and listening to the teacher kind of set up how the rest of the class is. If you think back to your high school days, you would probably break things down into kind of 20-minute sections where you kind of break off and do something independently. Maybe there's a writing prompt and you're going to kind of write a paragraph about what you're analyzing in the text. Then you might get together in kind of a group and kind of share what your thoughts were, have that dialogue, that discussion kind of back and forth, and then kind of share out with the larger class in general. So that model can work both ways. If you're in the classroom, like if you guys here in front of me, I can group you guys as a group of 4 here, a group of 3 here, a group of 3 there, stay in your seats and kind of have a quiet conversation about what's going on. Likewise, with those numbers showing us, we got 0 to 4 kids. I might have 4 kids remote. You guys on the remote, go in this Google Classroom breakout group, have a discussion. I'm going to jump in periodically as you're kind of having that discussion as it's kind of going on. So that's kind of that seminar model and kind of the classroom as you can use both the remote and kind of the in-person as you're kind of unfolding. You haven't changed the instruction for either group. You're just using kind of different quote-unquote locations of where people are for those kind of smaller group breakdowns and everything that's going on. So this is a sample schedule, how it kind of rotates. The other thing I want to draw your attention to, I won't go through every single class period, but 2 other things I want to draw your attention to is the free time. This would be an opportunity that a student could leave. They could also, it's teamed up in this example with their lunch. So they could actually go home if they have the transportation, eat lunch at home if they wanted to, have some time for themselves at home and then come back to school for their afternoon classes. If they decided to stay in the building, they would go through lunch through our kind of lunch rotation system. They would have some free time in the next place where we'd assign to a location. For example, this could be the library where this particular student is assigned, and they have about 45 minutes to do some homework and just kind of unwind and relax before the next set of classes kind of unfold. And then they kind of shift into their afternoon. And the last little bit is that last class of the day would be one of these online, I shouldn't say, well, it's online. One of these classes we determined to be an online course. In this case, the example of Spanish 3. So the student could at that point, if they had the transportation again, could leave and go home and participate in class, especially if they were close enough to the school to get home in time. Otherwise, we still have the room for them here for the class to be going on. They'd be here with adult and maybe some other classmates that remain in the building. They'd be interacting with their teacher through Google Meet at that point. Who would be engaging with both kids remotely and those kind of present in the building and kind of following the same routine. We'll be speaking back and forth, breaking out in groups, so on and so forth, as the class kind of unfolded. So that's kind of an update. VHS, I don't know if anyone has any questions.
So did you say students will be getting new schedules in the mail? Or are they going to stay with the schedules that they were already given?
So, I mean, they're staying with their schedule, but this is true on any given year. We might make an adjustment to a room assignment that class is. We do have some conflicts with some kids, which again, is every single year. So counselors, when they come in August, they'll be working with those individual kids to kind of sort that out. If you've had high school age kids, you know they like to adjust their schedules all up through the first 2 months of school. So we'll be dealing with those changes as typical through our counseling department when they come in the building. That's all normal business for us and nothing that's out of the ordinary. And like we tell kids, I think we enroll it in June. I think it's the first time we opened it up in Infinite Campus, and like any year, there's details that change throughout. And then the first day of school, you get your new schedule, and should we read that one and not the one from.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Great, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, Dean, is this you, hybrid model?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. We'll go off script because I usually do love to improv. We got state guidance on July 14th. And, I guess up to that point, we finished the school year, we took a collective sigh of relief. I actually told people, go get away for a couple of weeks. It was a tough school year, go get away, rest. We're gonna really have to come back and work hard. And when the state guidance dropped on July 14th, it was tough because it was a lot of local control. And I felt like, oh my goodness, we have to build this almost from the ground up. And the model that's been built, one of the sayings that I just put out a couple of weeks ago was, there's an African proverb, if you want to run fast, run alone. If you want to run far, run together. And I realized that I have not run together much here, or there's been a small group running together, because we had to move fast. The guidance dropped July 14th. And we are now, is it August 6th?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. And we had to do this kind of quickly and put it together. The other thing that happened is, and I would have no hope of accomplishing what we're asking this district to do, which is to basically reimagine and redesign education. And I would have no hope of being to do that if we didn't have supportive boards, we didn't have a really strong administrative team, and we didn't have a community that would support it. And I absolutely know I'm asking a big thing of people. When the cars first came out, they were called horseless carriages, because that's all people could envision. And that's what they look like. They look like carriages drawn by a horse, only there wasn't a horse. It was an internal combustion engine. And over time, those designs evolved. And so what I've spent a lot of time, and we started with the administrative team, and we brought on Dr. Bartlett, who's been an absolute joy to work with, and also just an intelligent person who has pushed our thinking. We started with a book called My Iceberg is Melting, or Iceberg is Melting, about penguins. And we had to get the understanding that this is a humongous change. And it's hard to implement a change. Some people run around and say, the iceberg isn't melting, we'll just go on as it is. And You see those people with the coronavirus. And other people are like, well, the iceberg is melting, but if we just do everything we've always done the way we've done it, everything will be fine. We've always done it this way, it's always been fine. And a small group of people can get together and say, nope, the iceberg's melting. We got to find a new iceberg or else it's going to crumble. And we started talking about the change process. And we also started talking about this hybrid model. And our concept of hybrid is different than most people's in the state. Because when they say hybrid, they're just talking about an alternating schedule. Most districts, they say, well, we're doing hybrid instruction. We're going to have half the kids in on Monday and Tuesday, while the other half is doing remote instruction. And I don't know if they have different people teaching those or not. And then on a different day, we're going to switch that and have kids. That's a rotating schedule. That's not a hybrid instructional model. And so we really have pushed a hybrid instructional model that says, whether you are in school or whether you are remote, it's the same lesson plan, the same learning platform, the same everything. Because it's focusing on Dr. Chan's third goal, nimble and adaptable. I don't know what is going to happen this coming year. I could wake up one Monday morning, get a phone call, and say the whole district is on orange or the whole district is on red because something had happened. At that point, we'll have to pivot and be nimble. The best model that I could come up with, thinking about this, and with a lot of help from Dr. Bartlett, is the idea of a hybrid program. So we started talking about hybrids. I have a hybrid golf club. I don't take out my wood and hit my wood, take out my iron and hit my iron. I have one club that does both. I have a hybrid car. I don't drive my electric car and then drive my internal combustion car. I have one car that has both. And we started to think about what that would mean for education. Now, I've seen it before. I've done remote education since my doctoral level. I've been in this idea of digital remote education. I've taught at the college level with remote. I've had 6 people in the classroom and my little laptop, because I didn't have much of a learning platform, with 2 people on my laptop and working together. We're having a hybrid meeting right now. There are people here, there are people on the Google Meet. We've done this before, I've seen it. I think the part when it really struggles is when you have so many people on the remote part that it's hard to engage them with the people that are in here. And then you have to say, okay, I might have to switch my model a little bit and think about that. But we've done this before. If we go back to Dr. Gage, for a long time he talked about 21st century learning. And if we go back to what he talked about and listen to him, he talked about flipped classrooms. He talked about use your technology to do this at home, which is the kind of the remote instruction. Use your in-class time to do processing and so forth. And we need to look at how to blend that in-class and remote at the same time. And a lot of people are saying, okay, well, you have to have separate teachers for those. And we may do that at certain levels. We may have to do that. The other thing that I've understood is we have this overall framework that's going to look different in elementary, it's going to look different in middle, it's going to look different in high school, and it's going to look different as people who are actually working those buildings get their hands on it and say, this is how we can best implement it. But we have to start with, we have to do both at the same time. Because during the year, your student may be in school, they may be out of school for 2 weeks as we are ruling out exposure to COVID or something like that. They may come to school and they'll have a symptom, and the nurse says, you need to go home until that symptom is clear. People are going to be in and out, they're going to be switching. When I looked at the level system, I first looked at Sauhegan, they had standard times. We're going to do it this way, this way, this way, and people can switch. And I was like, what, you're predicting what the virus is going to do? You better hope the virus changes at the time that you're switching those plans. And the hybrid model was the only one that we could come up with that was flexible. It's the only model that we could come up with that would allow students to go in and out of school as the virus comes or as needs happen. Now, with that flexibility, I think my administrators are about ready to strangle me because it brings complexity, it brings difficulties. And that's Dr. Chian's third goal that's so hard to put in there. So that's why I brought up that's why I've been pushing the hybrid model. We've talked about it with our administrators. We have, and I hear them talking about it. I mean, Adam's got it. Adam's got it. He's talking about it. Other administrators have it. They're talking about it. It takes a while to get it in your head. And we are so lucky to have, one more thing. This is where the state is going. Frank Edelblue called me up the other day. And he was talking to me a little bit, because very early on I was talking to Frank and I said, Frank, if we're really going to make this happen, we need to look at the idea of MOOCs, massive online open courses. That, you know, if we could educate a bunch of kids with like very few teachers, then we could handle that remote instruction. A lot of places in the state, a lot of superintendents, their remote instruction plan is VLAX. Their plan is, we'll teach the kids in school. If you want remote instruction, go to VLAX. VLAX is filling up. VLAX has capacity problems right now. So if you look at what, at the iLearn program, Frank Edelblue has been rolling it out in the last couple days, and you go to iLearn, there's $6 million spent from the CARES money for a 3-year license, and it's the Canvas learning platform. But the concept is absolutely the same. And that's what he's talking about. We're going to buy this platform and give it to schools. Your remote instruction and your in-class instruction are on the same platform. And then it doesn't matter whether you're remote or in class. We're not going to roll out iLearn because it's one more thing we'd have to implement. We already have Google Classroom, we have some other things, but the concept is the same. And I'm not wedded to it. I'm not. It's not something I came up to. It's not something I'm insisting. It's my way or the highway. It's the only thing I see that's going to be flexible enough to deal with the changing circumstances that are going to happen. And I'm just so happy that Dr. Bartlett happened to apply for our job and come down, because she's done this in her classrooms up in Ashland. She's seen it work. Now, no one knows Dr. Bartlett here. So she's coming in and she said, you know, she's not coming in like, I've got the answer, here it is, I'm going to lay it at your feet. She realizes she doesn't have a whole lot of relationship with people. She realizes it's tough for an outsider to come in and say, hey, let me tell you how to do it right. And she doesn't mean that at all. But she's got a good idea about how this instruction model can work. And as she's talked to our administrators, she's really made some points, and they're starting to see that, you know, this just might work. It just might do that. So I'm going to sit down with Dr. Bartlett, talk a little bit about the hybrid model that she's looking at, or that we are looking at.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hello. So last week, I talked to you a little bit about the hybrid instruction model, and I know that it's really difficult in everyone's mind who, we all have kind of this kind of standardized educational experience. We all went through traditional schools, and so it's really hard to visualize how this would work. And I know that, trust me, I know that. So I think that my goal is maybe the next time that we're all together, that I can maybe model this for you with maybe a group of administrators, if I can put them remotely outside of this room as long as they behave, we'll see, and kind of walk through this where maybe you will be the in-class students. So the idea of the whole model is really that it is ideal for that kind of consistent instruction, the really important parts of what we do in schools, that direct instruction, right? Assessing for learning and of learning, and also kind of reinforcement of teaching, those coachable moments, right? So if you take those really important pieces to the whole reason we're here as educators, if you can take those and put those in a place or deliver them in a way that the student's location doesn't matter, and you have the flexibility for students who may be in and out of the classroom for various reasons, then you're going to have that consistent, growth in kids. And that's a really important thing, because right now, there are just big gaps everywhere, and school districts across the country have struggled in trying to figure out how to really do this well. I know that Dr. Gage did a ton of work, I think primarily with the middle school and the high school on 21st century learning, and you can see that. You can see that when Adam talks about this model and when Brian talks about this model, it's a level of understanding that it's making sense and where they have some familiarity with it and they use technology. And I think everybody is learning and everybody's understanding that, but it really is going to give you that direct personal instruction with students, and it's not an add-on. It's not something you do after you finish teaching kids that now you have to create something for the remote students. It's happening simultaneously, and it's as if you have the kids in the classroom with you. And I'm not saying propping yourself in front of the smart board or the whiteboard all day and just doling out information, like that's the way to do it, because we know that even in an in-person classroom, that's not the way to do it, right? You start to tune out within a very quick amount of time. You need to engage kids, and if you can have small group instruction, and if you can rotate them through centers and give them some options, voice and choice, and still be consistent in how they receive that information and their active learning time, you're going to have success. So this model is about that. It's about whittling this down to the really core elements, the things that we already do really well, the workshop model that works really, really well, that direct instruction, looking at the data. How are they doing? Now I'm going to target exactly what they need. And that's a really important part of this. So I'm hopeful that, again, I haven't even had a chance to meet more than a handful of teachers. And I'm a teacher at heart, and it's really hard for me to stand up here and describe something to you that just probably sounds so crazy. And it's going to be just as difficult for teachers who aren't here to be hearing this coming from me, because they don't know me at all. They don't know, what my intentions are or how I really feel about education and how important that is to me. So I'm hoping to have the opportunity to work with teachers and really give them the support that they need and help them provide the absolute best level education that the kids here deserve. That's really all I want from this whole thing. And I want to be able to do that consistently. And I don't want any kid to be at a disadvantage because he can't be in the classroom or she can't be in the classroom. That's the most important thing. So as we move forward, we're just going to try to keep, building relationships and doing what we need to do to get everybody in the right place. So thank you. Right?
I was just going to say that I guess this past spring with the online education, I think families were disappointed because families were only comparing it to live education. I don't think we didn't have anything remote to compare it to. So I think as a community it was a challenge. But I think I understand what you're saying, and I think it sounds exactly what the community expects. I mean, I think it sounds perfect to me. So I don't know how it could have been done any better from the description I'm hearing. At least I feel like I completely understand what the concept and what the plan is. That sounds great.
I mean, there's no substitution for having kids in the classroom. There's absolutely, you can never recreate that and have it be an optimal experience. You just can't, and we know that. So we're going to try to make the best out of this that we possibly can, the best situation, and give kids that contact, the attention, and the personalized service that they deserve, so that they can continue to grow and learn every day. Yeah.
Dr. Bartlett, Glenn Mann from Dunbarton. Dr. C said you implemented this up in Ashland. How big of a group was it that you used it?
So Ashland is between 165 and 170 students, K-8. We restructured the whole school during my first year there, and all veteran teachers that had been there, a few of them 40 plus years, and really used to it, just having their students and closing that door and start the day, end the day, and then they did their thing. Fantastic educators, just so dedicated to kids. And so we just started realizing that, doing that isolates everyone, and it doesn't really give the kids what they need on an individual level. So we redesigned everything, and ultimately within the second or third year, we went from having tiers, which were multi-age groups from K1 and 2, and then 3, 4, 5, and then 6, 7, 8. We wanted to hone in even more and be even more proactive in personalizing, so we went to co-teaching teams, which have multi-age groups, just 2 multi-age groups, and that's through our entire school. Middle school model is a little different. They self-select their schedule every 12 weeks. It's a really cool process there. But so when we use this model and we had to switch, in a day to adding that virtual piece, it was nothing. It was routine. The only issue was that the younger kids don't necessarily take their devices home, so we had to get them home to them. But we really had unbelievable participation from kids and support from families, because the kids do this model every day. And they know it. They know what they're supposed to do. They know they go onto Google Docs or Google Classroom, or they know they go into this program or that program, and they do their 15 minutes of Dreambox math, and then they do, and we had virtual meetings and direct instruction set up really quickly. So we were very fortunate that we had been doing this for almost 5 years, this model, so that when it came to adding that virtual piece, the kids knew exactly what they needed to do, and so did families. So we were really lucky, really fortunate in that.
It was easier on the teachers, I imagine, too.
Yeah, easier, but when you have a great group of teachers and so dedicated, like they wanted to be on all the time. They wanted to be, and I had to, you guys got to shut it down at some point. You've got to give yourself a break, but just amazing educators. So I was very fortunate to be a part of that and a great group. So I've seen this work. I've seen it work without the virtual piece. I've seen it work in the classroom every day. I've seen my co-teachers had, close to 40 kids in their co-teaching group. And they worked together in tandem. One taught the literacy, one taught the math. They integrated science and social studies. They followed this model. They targeted instruction. They used performance data to target instruction, move kids forward and track their progress. And it's pretty powerful. And I would not even take a risk by telling you that if you asked any of them, they would say they would never go back. They would never go back to having their own one classroom by themselves, trying to do everything and kind of just lobbing it into the middle and hoping that it gets to all the kids.
I think it was you last week who said that children will be able to log on one time and still have access to all the different pieces and platforms that teachers may be using. And we're still going down that path, and that will still be
Sure.
log on to like Google Classroom or whatever it is, and there'll be links to take them to other areas, so they won't have to log in multiple times.
We're working with a new program now that we use in Ashland called Clever, especially for the younger kids, where they can even use a QR code to scan themselves in, and it logs them into everything. And so they just have the icons that they need. They don't have a big overwhelming kind of amount of apps to access, but there's a lot of ways that we can streamline that process and make sure that we're using that learning platform of Google Classroom as the central place. And so when you have that set up, students should be able to go in, and any class that they're connected with, they have a dashboard that they can just drop down and go right to that class. And if all the resources and links and documents and assignments are all right there for that class, they're not scrolling through a long list trying to find, wait, what am I even doing right now, right? It's just much more user-friendly and cleaner for kids. So, all of those pieces, and again, in SAU 67, things happen really quickly, and teachers did an incredible job. When I know what my experience was at Ashland, and then I know other teachers and other schools around the state, and comparing that to both, and Dunbarton, our teachers did fantastic at that. Picking things up on the fly, making things work, learning new things as you were going along. It was incredible. I haven't heard that from other districts that haven't completely been ready to go for this. Most of them just kind of barely held on, and that's not the feeling I get from what happened here. And knowing that they use the workshop model and are really comfortable with that, I think is a huge benefit. So I think teachers are in a really good place, a really good place.
And we're confident between trying to figure out the pickup transportation piece with the technology piece, and then also trying to streamline the piece for all of our students, that we can get both of those up and running for the beginning of our school year.
Sure, I think I can't speak for transportation. I can't speak to that, but I do know that there's a couple things that are basically a matter of some uploading of a few things here and there. And I wish Roy was here because he could speak to that really well.
Shannon, I think that because he's communicated with us, Roy's getting the Clever access for the program. He's double checking that anything he might have missed that could be used for. teachers had their seesaw training, K through 2. So that's been set up already, and also within seesaw, all the teachers were there. They know that, you know, I'm Joe Smith. When I click in as Joe Smith, I will have my unified arts, my classroom, my intervention. So yes, that feels better than transportation.
Okay. Excellent.
And I
Thank
did
you.
send out a big list of all of the programs that all work through Clever. So if we're using that and kids have accounts with them, they just log into Clever and it's like a single sign-on. Perfect. Makes it much easier. Especially for little kids. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barber.
I'm just going to add one thing. I think one of the most difficult things that this summer has been is it's summertime. I mean, it just is, and we've had to work around vacations, and our staff really, isn't engaged until the beginning of September, and we put in the extra days of training, and later on you'll see what's looking at the training. I don't know if it'll be enough. I mean, it'll be hard. It's like, you know, I go back to Apollo 13 and other things like that when people tried to do almost impossible things. You make the goal, you get in there, and the other thing I've learned in this process, I got to trust. I have to trust that the administrator's going to do the job. I got to trust that our teachers are going to come in and they're going to perform the way they always have. Like I said, I think the only reason that I think I have a hope of this is happening is because of the real good resources we have in the school, and it's always been our teachers. And I feel that. I do. I know people say, well, you're just saying that because you're political. I like to run together. Well, I don't like to run at all, but I like to work together. That's me, that's team. And it hasn't been that process here. But now I'm asking, let's come together, look at the overall model, and try to get it done. And then my other ask is, it's 10 minutes of 8. Is it time to take a break before we move into the other part of the agenda? Or
Always the first one has for a break, the last one to go for a run. Yeah, let's take a 10-minute break until 8 o'clock, 12-minute break. Thanks, everyone. He does. So I think we are. And that's the problem.
Are you on, Jerry, on the call today?
No, what happened?
Oh, did Nick talk for
Oh, but just like last week?
more than an hour about like just finance stuff? Like, they have thrown off the entire rest of the agenda. Finally, just- He did it. The numbers look good. Yeah. I think he said still, you know, first meeting August 24th or something.
Here we go. We good? Okay. All
You're
right.
gonna put up a website for me.
We are back live. We on the,
Yep, we're on operational status, little changes, and I've asked Roy to bring up a website. He's getting to it. Jen or Eric, which part of this website should he go to?
So,
Okay.
go, if you click over, I mean, you can, here, I'll just stand up here real quick. I'm Jenna Reardon, I'm on both school board, I'm also a nurse practitioner in the community, so I look at this dashboard every day. But I just want to point out cases right now, kind of where we're at and why we're thinking about different levels. So right now, there's currently, you can see the number of active cases, but 21 hospitalizations and no one in an ICU in all of New Hampshire, which is great. But Roy, if you can go to the last tab, I think it says map of current positive cases at the top. Yeah, do you see it? Yeah. And this is really helpful, I think, for us as well to kind of see what's happening. This is updated daily. So as of today, you can see, if you scroll down a little bit further, right, in Merrimack County right now, there are 11 cases in all of Merrimack County. So you can track it. We can track it daily and kind of see what the numbers are, but 11 cases in Merrimack County is extremely low. I'm not sure we'll see numbers, you know, hopefully lower than that, but I'm not sure. I mean, that's probably less than the average number of positive flu cases during the winter. It's not a lot of cases in Merrimack County right now, I guess, basically.
So, yeah, what would be a lot of cases? And are you as a nurse, you said you're on this every day because this is part of your job. You're in a long-term care facility, or?
I'm in a family in a long-term care.
Okay. What numbers would cause you to really be concerned as these tick up?
So I don't know that there's a specific number that would be alarming to me. We look at the number, we look a lot at the number of people hospitalized because the actual number of positive cases also is not indicative of how many people are sick from COVID in the community. So we look at hospitalizations, we look at number of cases. I don't know that there's a specific number that you could put it to. We look for trends. So if there's a big jump all of a sudden, we would be concerned. I would say that 11 cases, I don't know how many people exactly are in Merrimack County, but the percentage,
How many?
150,000.
150.
So I think when you're looking at a percentage of infected individuals, and not even sick, these are just people who have had a positive test or a presumed infection, that it's, I don't know, great at math on top of my head, but that's a really low percentage. So I think that when we talk to other specialists in the community, other doctors and infectious disease doctors, pediatricians, and we've all kind of put our heads around this, and all we can really come up with at this point is that the cases are so low right now in Merrimack County that there isn't a concern for community spread right now at this point.
Okay, so I have, because I assume it's going to be me, it may be different, but I assume it's going to be me, and I'm going to have to make a decision about changing levels at some time during the year. I've been making snow calls for 14 years. I have all that background in me. I've never made a COVID call. What might I be, what sort of factors would I be looking at not just sheer numbers of infections, what other things or what other metrics would I want to take into account as, or we, if it's a group decision, want to take into account if we were going to make a change from a yellow to a green or an orange?
I'm going to address it just real quickly. My recollection, we voted last week that in fact we gave you that hour essentially with consultation with Dr. Schulman and Jenna.
And it scares the heck out of me.
Right, and it scares me. I certainly don't pretend to be an expert on epidemiology or when, so I think that we would, if we saw a jump in those dashboard numbers, separate from cases in the school, which would have to be addressed, and in the Bow community or Dunbarton community, which would have to be addressed differently altogether. I think if we have cases in our community, we immediately call up the Department of Public Health and Dr. Chan and say, what do we do? What are we supposed to do? What are your recommendations? I think that when we're looking at green to yellow to orange as a school district as a whole, you have to look at trends. I think that if we felt like there was an increase in cases in the state of New Hampshire, in Merrimack County, or an increase in hospitalizations, you would have to pull in expertise of people. So, I did reach out to Concord Hospital today to see if they would formally consult with us. I know they are with other school districts. I think that you have to pull in the infectious disease experts. You have to pull in that. Nobody knows the answers to these questions. So I talked to our infectious disease department at Concord Hospital last night, and there's no good answer because nobody's done this before. So we don't have a hard number. We don't have a hard yes or no, this is when we go. You have to follow the numbers closely, and if you see a trend of an uptick in cases or an uptick in hospitalizations or an uptick in deaths, you immediately have to jump on that and make an analysis. And I think that's going to take the brains of specialists and Dr. Chan and, doctors in the community. I know we've had doctors in the community that have offered to help.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm running ahead of you. Have we formally reached out to the Concord Hospital people to ask them if they'd be willing to work with us or not?
So Jenna sent us an email copying the person who is doing that for districts. He's in charge of setting those relationships up. And we've expressed our interest in talking to him and setting something.
But I haven't heard that.
I just sent it today.
That was today.
Oh, you sent it today? Well, come on, let's get some results here.
I talked to one of the infectious disease doctors last night, and he said he'd be happy to offer advice, but for formal consultation might be a good idea. And so I reached out today.
And is a formal consult, because part of me, I go back to liability. I go back to, the more formal advice we have, the better off we are as far as following that advice. So is formal consultation something, we're going to explore it.
We're going to explore it.
Well, I think it's similar to getting a lot of resources to make an accurate snowfall. You wouldn't just do that on your own. You're going to look at weather services, media, and things like that so that you can make an accurate decision.
And I think that I consider myself very knowledgeable on COVID. I've dealt with it a lot, but I wouldn't feel comfortable, by myself making that call. I don't know about Dr. Schulman, but I know we're also in that committee, and I
think we need to pool our resources. I don't think you'll be able to put a number on that grid. You're just going to need to know what the trends are, and we're going to need to use us, our medical expertise, and the resources in the community. But I think ultimately the TBD on that grid is going to have to not be a number. It's going to have to be flexible. Yeah, it's going to be flexible because it's going to vary depending on the situation. If we have 11 cases in town, but all 11 of them are in our classrooms, that's different than if all 11 are in elderly home care situations. So it varies a lot. It depends on the rate of uptick, as you mentioned. So there are a lot of variables. So we're not going to be able to put a specific number on that grid. We're going to need to be flexible and pull it all together, and we'll make a decision with the resources we have. So you'll ultimately make the decision, it sounds like, and you'll have.
Well, I'm not necessarily advocating for
it. But what they do or don't, you'll have, I think, a lot of support around you.
But there's no number you can give.
You can't put a number on there.
Okay. And I would say it's the same for a snow day call, because, and I hate to go back to it, but it's the closest thing I have is the horseless carriage ahead. You know, you have to say, well, if it's over 2 inches an hour accumulation, but when's it falling? Is this the first storm of the year, or have we gone through 4 or 5 different storms? You know, are people used to it? And I know what you're saying, you have to take those into account as you do it. It just really is concerning for me, because I just don't have the expertise.
And I think we err on the side of caution when you talk to experts, you gather their feeling, and that's what I've tried to do before making any decisions, you know, as a school board, you know, I think we've tried to do that, and the general consensus among specialists at that time is that transmission is very low in all of New Hampshire right now, and
But people are
this risk
concerned.
level is very low. The community spread is low.
People are concerned. We just had NASCAR, Bike Week's coming up, Labor Day's coming up. I've heard there's evangelists having a meeting that people are concerned about. What sort of effect do those events have on, or do we even know?
We don't know. We have no idea. I mean,
Well, one question, actually, you just made me think of this. What about all those rallies? So Concord had like at least 1,000-person Black Lives Matter rally. Like, was there any uptick after those
there was
events?
not, and not with 4th of July either, which is a big vacation.
But
But people come, I don't know. I think,
But the one that I think we're most concerned about, and the one I think that the teachers and epidemiologists are most concerned about, unless Dr. Chan, we haven't got the kids back together yet.
yes.
And that is the big concern. And so people talk about, well, let's open the valve slowly, or let's ease into it and see what happens when we get the kids back together. And I don't know the answer to that either, but I think that's what the epidemiologists are concerned about. That's why we closed schools to begin with. We closed schools to begin with because we felt we could slow so as we reopen, but I don't know, is it, you know, I'm personally a rip the Band-Aid off and go forward sort of person, but I think that's the debate, you know, we have
Right.
to have.
And I think the consensus among a lot of medical professions is that the community spread in New Hampshire as a whole right now is low enough that the benefit of going back to school, or I guess we don't know what's gonna happen when a bunch of kids get together in school. We don't know that in New Hampshire with the amount of spread we have. So, but the risk is low enough now based on community spread numbers that it would be safe to assume that risk at this point.
A couple of things. One, we have, I don't know if we have data, but we have been open to 5 states over the summer for AAU basketball. And I've heard no reports from the institutions that are running those on an uptick, which is a good sign, right? You're bringing kids back together, 700 kids in a gym, 2 days straight, and we see no uptick. The second thing, back to your school day analogy, Dr. Cascad, the good thing about this compared to school day is you can say, hey, we're taking a timeout, it's Thursday night, we see an uptick, no school Friday, it's remote, we'll talk about it over the weekend, we'll make a decision on Monday, well, we go Monday remote too. We can take time to make that decision, collect information, talk to the experts. We don't have to make that 5 a.m. call like you do with a snow day, right? We can just say, hold, remote today, it's a snow blizzard day, whatever you call it, and go from there. But right now, what I'm seeing from the numbers, and we've been open to Massachusetts, you know, everybody, go to the mountains, you see every license plate there is. And we're only at 11 in Merrimack County. I think that's a good sign to me.
We've also had the local rec groups here, the boat rec camp's been open. My boy goes there. They don't have masks on. They're indoors most of the time. And they co-work to some extent, but they're together, and we've been comfortable with that. And they've not caused an uptick.
I think the big take home, you know, and everybody that I've spoken to about this is that we just don't know. And that it doesn't seem that there's any data to support that a trickle effect right now like opening slowly would make a difference. As a matter of fact, if you go to a part-time schedule, kids, when they're not in the classroom, are probably going to be cohorting with other kids or going to some sort of daycare or childcare or grandma's house in Massachusetts. You don't know where they're going to be. So actually the exposure risk of those types of models is potentially higher, but we don't know. I mean, there's so many unknowns about this. We haven't faced this
And we did
before
look
ever.
at some other countries with their school reopening, and we saw that the majority of them seemed like things went awfully smoothly.
And we have the front runners over there at the southern part of the state. Cole Brown's opening when?
They're open for staff on the 14th, and the kids are 4 days later, or whatever that month.
So we have some.
So we'll monitor the cases in
Yeah.
North
The ground's
Carolina.
opening without requiring masks.
I mean,
The other thing, and this is where we talked about the rolling openings. The other thing that a slow opening does, or rolling opening, is we have a lot of training to do, we have a lot of planning to do, we have a lot of training to do. And as this has evolved, I feel confident that we could probably get the high school and the middle school up pretty close to Labor Day. As you've heard us talk about things like parking, training younger students in the use of PPE and new procedures and so forth. That's why that rolling opening was pushed. And as we go forward towards school, I'm just not sure that I'm not going to get saying, gee, we need more time for the rolling opening.
and doing it for educational purposes, I think makes sense. Doing it for safety of students or teachers, there's not a lot of science to support that right now. I think this is different, If it needs to be done for teacher training and educational purposes, because this is a whole new world.
Well, it's not only teacher, but it's also, we're going to have kids coming into school that haven't seen each other in a long time.
Yeah.
We're going to have kids who, we're going to have to be working with them on mask use, on how to walk around the schools. It's just a lot of work. And Lori and, Lauren's on there. Did I push you too hard to get schools open as far as the rolling opening? And I'm putting you on the spot, but sorry, I do that sometimes.
So, no problem. I'll go right back. No, I think you listened when we really thought about the time and how we wanted to do it. I never felt that the proposal wasn't well discussed at how to do it.
But just you especially, and probably Adam with the middle school as far as training kids and getting the transportation is a big piece. That's the other reason to have the slower rolling openings so that we can train procedures and so forth.
At the elementary, it's even a slower roll for kindergarten because we haven't done the screening yet. They will come in even a few days after first through fourth. So I think that really, I think it's good for kids. I think it's also good for our routines. Let's talk transportation. I think that helps transportation get an opportunity to get used to the buses. I think the big thing we're thinking of is as we come back in, it's a lot to think that suddenly there's hundreds of people in a building that I joke at BES, there's been like 10 of us there on and off all summer, but I think I think we're good.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, I'm sorry. But I think that's why we were looking at the rolling opening was we have a lot of work to do. So I think Fred's made it clear that it will be me makes the decision and consultation. I just haven't read the minutes.
Let's just step back though. I think Jenna made a good point that no one on the boards, no one in the administration or in this room is an epidemiologist. And we are not going to make a decision without consulting the educated resources that we have have access to. So I think we can all agree with that. We're not going to leave you stranded on an island without resources, right? We're not going to make a decision. We do have two medical professionals in the room, but the rest of us are normal people without those advanced degrees. So you're not on an island.
So we talked about community spread. What about if we have a positive COVID case in the school, a class, or a cohort? Is there any thought from my medical community on that? Or?
I think if you have a single case and therefore in a single classroom, we need contact tracing to see who is exposed. And we can define whether we're talking about someone who has symptoms, and who already knows, versus someone who's diagnosed. I think it's a lot different than multiple kids in a classroom versus children in more than one classroom. I think if you have we will need to flesh this out and have a more succinct plan, but potentially children in more than one classroom, maybe that's a reason for a school closure. And maybe not a change of level, maybe that one school is closed. It may not necessarily mean that all schools have to change their plans.
But
But
we're
it will-
pretty interconnected. I mean, kids go home, they have older siblings, and they connect
We need
into
to flesh that out. It might be different in a household where there aren't siblings in different schools versus when there are. We'll need to have some method of contact tracing. Should be responsible for following up with families, finding out, are there siblings at other schools? And we should have information on that. Were they on the bus? If we can get the information as to who they are spending time with, who they interacted with, what are the parts of the building that child was in during the day that they were there. If we can manage to do some contact tracing, we might limit how much closure we need to do. And if we can't follow through with the contact tracing, we may need to do more closures just because we don't know.
I mean, it's my understanding, and I'm not saying I understand it perfectly, but that's the role of DHHS. That we don't do contract tracing. We
No,
follow
in the
up.
reopening guidelines that they put out, I have the slide up right here. It says that if there's a positive case in the classroom, the people who need to quarantine for 14 days will vary. We, the New Hampshire DPHS, will work with students to notify and inform parents, guardians, students, and other staff.
That's DHHS.
Yeah.
Will do contract
Yeah,
tracing.
so I think that the goal is if you have a positive case in a school, you contact them and they help us figure that out.
Well, one of the questions that's come from our community, and I don't know the answer, is will we let the community know if we have a positive case? And I guess as medical professionals, and I live with one who takes HIPAA very, very seriously to the point where, calling Fred, why? Just calling Fred. Is it a HIPAA violation if we share, or what do we have to be concerned about as we share with the community about possible positive cases?
I'll speak off the top of my head, I would think it wouldn't be a violation to say that there was a case in a school as opposed, without identifying the person who was that case. Be careful because the information you divulge could be specific enough to let people know who that person was, so.
Yeah, and that's the fear. We live in a small community, and we say, well, we had a positive COVID case in school, and pretty soon the amateur sleuths have basically figured it out because we live in a small community, and now it's out on Facebook, and I'm worried about have I now put out someone's private medical information that shouldn't be put out there. But I also want to inform the community because I feel that as parents, if they're sending their kids into school and they're concerned about this, like a lot of people have said, well, I'm okay sending my child to Green, but I'm not sure I'm going to be okay in September, or I wouldn't be okay if I knew that there was a positive case at my kid's school. Same with our staff. Our staff may feel very differently about coming to school if there's a positive case.
I think that, I don't know the exact rules, and you can talk to the public health about it. In the nursing home, when we've had employees that have a positive test, we're notified as other employees in the nursing home that there was a positive case That's all we're told. There was a positive case in an employer.
And that's not a HIPAA violation. If people do their sleuthing and figure it out, they might figure it out, but it is not generally a HIPAA violation to inform someone in a workplace or think in a school that someone in that building had a particular illness.
And I would follow up with DHHS. I'll probably sit down with the nurses and talk about following up with DHHS.
Yeah, I think the nurses could do that too. They could be the ones to call and talk with them.
But if I'm understanding this conversation correctly, there's potentially going to be multiple colors going on in different locations. It could be by grade, it could be by school, it could be the whole system is one color, but that's what we're talking about, I assume, right?
I think that's possible.
It's really going to.
Yeah, I don't know your last meeting, but
yeah.
I would think that it is possible that, I think the Department of Health is going to help us sort that out. The Department of Health might very well come in and say, well, elementary needs to be closed, and the other schools did not. And so, yes, that could very well happen. You could have one school where 100% remote, the other schools continuing on green.
And that is when I started thinking about this deeply. That's why I said, even if we're open in green, parents, you need to be ready. You need to be ready that your kids could be moved to remote instruction at a moment's notice because the school is, because their cohort group, because you've been asked to self-isolate, or you've been asked to quarantine. And I realized that I've learned that there's a difference between those two. But even if we open green, you can't just say, I'm done with it, my kids are in school, because they may not be in school, depending on what happens with these particular factors.
And then you may have one student in school because they're at the elementary school and everything's fine, but there might be an issue in their middle school classroom with their other student who then they may be remote. So it could even be within different students within their household. Some could be green and some could be yellow.
It's, by everybody involved, it's gotta be flexible. Families, it's gotta be flexible, school system, colors, it's all about flexibility.
Okay, Dean, where are we on the slides? Because we still in the operational status level?
So you're number 8, and I guess, I don't have the minutes to look at. What was the motion made last time?
The motion made last time was to give you authority with a select group of 3, and it sounds like we're talking about using outside resources to support that group. So are you raising a question with that authority? Or are you just recapitulating that authority?
I think what people want to know tonight is how are we opening?
Okay, so I think that I'd like to get through your red, yellow, green light matrix, and then the factors, which we did a lot of just now. Maybe we talk about the 7 bullets on the factors, and then obviously yellow, and then your 4 slides. Then I think I'll stop there and have a discussion on the opening status.
The board is going to vote on this. Last week, we voted on giving you the ability to change the status.
Right.
And we voted on the approval of the color coding system.
We're now going to vote on the color to start with after the next 2 or 3 slides.
Okay.
Can I jump in for a quick second?
Absolutely, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff Trexler. I made the motion last week to give the superintendent the authority to select the color level upon consultation with Jenna and Eric and with Jarrett. I think that was the motion that was approved.
That was if we changed, I thought, is if we changed from what was decided as the operational color.
My motion was, the intent of my motion was to give the superintendent the authority to select the color that was necessary, because he's got the resources available. If we want to change that, we certainly can tonight, but I think that was the vote. If we had the minutes, that was the motion that was made last week.
Okay, next slide, please. Jeff, I did not ignoring you at all. I get to the next slide. It says factors that impact status level decisions. Maybe it's a previous slide.
Next one, Roy, there you go.
Okay, I want to make it clear, we've talked about community spread data. We've talked about school community confirmed positive COVID results. I think those are 2 factors. The third factor that I have to look at is ability to staff schools and safely supervise students. And that there may come a time that I have to change the level of what we are doing because I just do not have enough staff to safely supervise students. And again, I don't know what that number is, and I don't know what that's going to be like, a month from now when we open schools. The fourth one is availability of critical staff. If I don't have nurses or administrators, I don't think I can open schools safely. Especially nurses, the plan hinges very heavily on them to screen people and to look people out. And in the past, we've gotten by without school nurses. I'm not sure in this particular way we can do it. Availability of PPE. If we do not have masks, gowns, or shields or other things we need to. I think the last 2, one of them compliance with safety protocols. I think why that's in there is I want to make it clear that if students do not comply with the safety protocols, they will be placed on remote instruction. We cannot, now there's a difference with developmental levels, there's a difference with working with kids to get to this, but if we have defiance of the safety protocols, we can't have kids, and they have to be placed on remote instruction because we have to have those safety protocols in place. That's number one. So we'll just talk about, so we finish up what you are saying. Next slide, Roy. We've begun to talk about our plan for reduced capacity in yellow. I think what you saw in the data earlier from the schools, it's not going to happen naturally. So we are going to have to force a reduced capacity. And what we are looking at is a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday in-school cohorts. Wednesday being the middle day when everyone is on remote instruction and there's deep cleaning of the school. And we just, alphabetical by last name, the idea is we want to cohort families as much as possible as it's going on. I see this as the most difficult one to deal with. It'd actually be easier if you were in orange when most people are remote, or when you were in green when everyone's in school. This is the half and half model. And I know a lot of districts have gone to this. This is the one that they call the hybrid. But this alternating schedule, I see the one with the most difficulties as far as teaching kids. Because you're going to have half the kids in on Monday, Tuesday. You're still teaching the other half remotely. They're there, they have to be taught remotely. You take Wednesday off, you bring the kids who are being taught remotely in, and you have to teach that first cohort remotely. And it's like a half and half. It's like if you're in a hybrid and you have a couple kids remote with most of your class in, or if you're in an area where you're mostly remote and you have a couple kids in, to me, that seems like a more manageable sort of thing. I see this as the hardest, but maybe I'm wrong. I've been in the classroom in a long, long time. But this is how we would propose to reduce capacity in the yellow status.
Except that Wednesday was an all remote.
Wednesday is all remote.
Right.
And we also clean the buildings completely. And then finally, the last slide. These are our orange levels. I think, when we're mostly remote and we're only having the absolutely, we think we call them critical students in, either parents absolutely need their kids to come to school or the kids have very critical needs. Principals have been looking these over as they've come in and they're nodding their heads. These are the kids who just really struggle in any type of remote instructional environment, or families that would really struggle with a remote instructional environment. We range from about 8 to 16%. Again, we'd have to say, do we have the staff who are able to come to school and supervise these students? In an orange status, we may have most of their instruction being delivered by teachers who are remote. The teachers may actually be remote, delivering instruction coming into school, or parts of their instruction coming into school, and we'll have to see if we have enough people in school able to meet the needs of these students and to supervise them adequately. And that's almost the reverse model of the green. It's almost the total opposite model of the green. Again, this is conceptual right now. It has to be played out by the principals, has to be played out by the teachers as they come together. And a lot of this involves special services and what goes on here. And I think that's
okay.
It for that.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Jeff, are you there? Trexler?
Yes, I'm here.
I'm wondering, I recall what you had for motion last week. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be wise for the board tonight to give a motion about what status we're going to open at. Would you be opposed to that, even with your motion last week?
Not at all. I think it would just be the board directing the superintendent to take an action.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we're trying to dig up in the minutes right now, Jeff, the exact language, but I don't want there to be a distinction or a conflict between what you recall and what was the actual motion, so.
Jared, I got it.
Go ahead.
So I'd like to say, given our current.
Okay, we just got the minutes updated, but go ahead, Clem.
I would like to say, given our current community spread numbers in the county and state, and that given the large majority of our public comments and surveys indicate that most people and parents want us to open in green, I would like to make a motion that SAU 67 open at the green level unless we have a significant change in the COVID landscape in the near future as determined by the SAU 67 Committee of Jenna Reardon, Eric Schulman, Jared Duncan, and Dr. Cascade.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion on the table?
And can you repeat that?
We've got it written down. We'll bring it before the end.
Jared?
Yeah, Jeff?
I just want to clarify what the procedure would be going forward with this motion. Does Dr. Cascadden have the authority to select the particular level, or is it I think Clem used the term committee or subcommittee of the four who would make that determination?
All right, I can change that to in consultation with the SAU 67 subcommittee. I think you're right, Jeff. That's the way we phrased it last week.
I think that would be the cleanest way to deal with it.
Yeah, I'm getting the sense that we should be, as a board, supporting Dr. Cascade and not putting him up to that entire decision by himself. Is that what I'm feeling from the board?
Yeah, I mean, otherwise he's going to want a committee for calling snow days.
Well, you know what I'd say, Jeff, to that?
I believe you're right. It's the decision that I have to make. I'll accept responsibility for making it, and it's in consultation with the other people. But I think if you say tonight that given the present spread, that we are looking at opening green, that is where we are moving toward.
Okay.
That is where we're moving toward. I recognize that 2 weeks from now, I may be putting out a parent square that says, given the current state of COVID or given positive cases that we have in our school, we're doing something different. But right now, it's the board's desire to say we open the week. That would be useful to me to give me direction with how to act.
And the big thing that Dr. Cascade just highlighted is 2 weeks from today is not school starting. So if there is information on a weekly, daily basis that changes, that will be assessed continually.
When is Bike Week? Just out of curiosity, exactly.
August 22nd.
22nd. Okay, so I think we
Because I
have
live in
to.
the Lakes.
Yeah, no, I
Sure.
think we have to. We'll have to revisit this before school. We'll have to, for sure.
Okay, I heard some discussion. Eric, did you say?
No, I was just clarifying that we're, as a board, making a motion in support of this decision to go green. Is that what this motion is?
So let me read again what I said, and if that doesn't jive with what it, because we can change it to direct Dr. C. But I think our board wants to.
He's okay. He said he's going to accept.
All right, I would like to make a motion that SAU 67 open at the green level unless we have a significant change in the COVID landscape in the near future as determined by Dr. Cascade in consultation with the SAU 67 Subcommittee of Jenna Reardon, Eric Schulman, Jared Duncan. And that would be it.
And that was seconded by Bryce. That's the motion on the table. We'll have to do a roll call vote, but is there any discussion? Jeff, we'll start with you. Any discussion?
Nope.
Okay. I keep spinning in my chair. This is fun. Okay, no discussion. Then we'll do a roll call vote. Jeff Trexler.
Yes.
Jeff Moody.
Yes.
Glenn Madden.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, Ryan.
Yes.
Eric Schulman.
Yes.
You're set over there.
All right.
Nicole.
Yes.
Jared Duggan, yes. Bryce Larrabee.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Jenna.
Yes.
Okay, that's a 10-0 vote to start in green, subject to many things to come.
And part of that is subject to being able to staff the schools.
Correct. That is another issue that must be considered as well. Okay, let me go back. We are now on 2020 opening days. Does the board have any other thoughts or discussion before we move into the 2020 opening days? Hearing none. Dr. Bartlett, who's...
I just wanted to give Dr. Barlow a chance to share about what those 5 days are going to be. well, not what they're gonna be, but what some of the things we come up with.
So as you can imagine, we're looking at 5 professional or to do some refreshers, really important work. But we're looking at a much bigger picture. Our first day, August 24th, that's a new teacher day. And there's various things scheduled there. It has to do with the teacher mentors and getting them up to date on some systems and processes. The 25th through the 31st, we're looking at kind of running those days in this hybrid model where we have different sessions happening. Teachers are in their buildings and accessing these sessions remotely as opposed to all coming to one place and all being together in a big group, which we don't want to happen. So in the grand scheme of things, we're really kind of doing a professional needs assessment to discover like what teachers need to be able to put things in place and feel comfortable at the start of the year, whether it be technology, whether it be some instructional things, using data or being familiar with data dashboards and how to make that data actionable. We're also looking at the social, emotional, learning and things that we have to really be cognizant of building and teachers coming into the building and everything that they've gone through in the midst of all of this, the uncertainty and the kind of isolation and things like that. We're also having some keynote addresses. Obviously, Dr. Cascadden will. Mr. Fisk is also going to do a keynote address about racism. He's kind of our go-to person that's going to talk about that and lead us through some great conversations about that in light of the Black Lives Matter movement and recent events. We've got some management updates that include air quality, facilities, things like that. Building level planning, there's a Title I harassment bullying trainings that have to happen as well. And we have a brand new absence management system too, which is going to help kind of have a centralized location and a digital platform for all of that too. So we're trying to figure out how to provide the things that people need in the most productive way, in the most safe way, and also give people the space that they need to kind of take all of that in and work in their buildings and make some decisions about maybe operational things in their buildings too, because that is very, very important. So it's a complex kind of web we're weaving here, and it's really going to come down to some really good conversations with the administrative team and sorting out like what's the best approach for the teachers to make sure they have what they need to feel prepared and comfortable with what we're doing.
Any questions? I have a question. Sure. Regarding having what they need, that makes me think about the technology. We discussed that some of the teachers needed upgrades in their technology. Do we know where we're at regarding making sure that all the teachers have the technology they need if they're at home doing remote teaching so that they can function and do so?
I can say that that is a conversation that is in progress. We're talking about a lot of different things and what maybe where we need new devices, if we need more devices, where that money will come from, whether it's a matter of shifting some technology maybe to put it in different places. So that's a much bigger conversation that we're working on.
How soon can we get an answer to that? I think you, Blaine. No offense. I'm thinking this in your purview. Like, when are we going to round that out? Because that seems like something we've never talked about for probably 6 weeks.
Well, I mean, so as things come up, I mean, this is kind of, I'll talk about a whole financial thing and just kind of touch on it. This is the time when we're starting to see those kind of things now come to the surface. You know, for example, we've done, contracted for an HVAC study. Obviously, we didn't budget for that. So those are the kind of things that we're moving around. In terms of technology, we've been talking to Roy about technology, not just for staff, but also for kids. Also internet access. In one of our grants not too long ago, we bought some internet hotspots for places that don't have good internet connection. We loaned all of those out where we had, when this was all going on. We're starting to get that technology back so we can put it back out again if we need to. So those are, I mean, it's not just a one size, we just did all of these things. We've been doing stuff all along. So since we talked about that the first time, we have bought some technology. We have redeployed some things. We've bought some software programs so that people can better manage classrooms and curriculum and those kind of things. So that's all going to be ongoing. Some of that money is CARES Act money. That's probably what that's going to be used for because there's no FEMA reimbursement for things like that. But some of the PPE we're starting to have to buy. And that's becoming a part of this whole discussion as well.
But do we know, I think Marcy, right, you have an older Chromebook and it didn't work very well, am I correct?
Not anymore. Not anymore.
Okay, that's my question.
That was the kind of thing.
But do we know how many new Chromebooks we needed and what they would cost? And is the question is, where are we gonna find that money, or we still don't know how many new Chromebooks we need?
Nope, neither of those. I think if we needed to buy Chromebooks, we have started to purchase those. But I don't have a figure on what that final number is going to be.
And
So I guess it's both.
And there will also be a process to have the kids will get a new electronics, new computers, get those materials in time to start school so that they can actually get logged in, software set up if they need to do so. They can't come into school the first day, need to be remote and have to figure out technology. We're not getting a day of technological help for the kids to get that stuff set up at home, or for the parents of those kids to get that stuff set up at home.
So getting the stuff back has been a process, and putting it back out is going to be a different process than we've usually done. And those are the kind of things that, that we got to start doing. Yeah. For sure.
Any other questions? You good?
Okay, sports and co-curriculars and other life
I was trying to be at 2 meetings at once this morning and probably failed miserably in both, but the NHIA met this morning. The first date to practice is September 8th after Labor Day. They announced that the first dates to play, they pushed off what they call low-risk sports of bass fishing and golf. They're looking at the 10th of September. They have some moderate risk sports that they're looking at the 18th. And they're looking at football in spirit of not starting the first day of competition until the 25th. I see this as still evolving. I don't see this as set in stone. I thought it was interesting this week. I was on a call, I think it was Monday, with Dr. Chan, who was speaking to educational leaders. And on his PowerPoint, it said, no contact sports. So I called up, I called up Jeff Collins at the NHI and said, look, just on a call, 125 educational leaders heard no contact sports. I just wanted to let you know that. And Mr. Collins contacted the governor's office because in the guidance that says we can open, it has guidance on opening youth sports. And that's what they've been wondering, that's what they've been following. So I feel that sports is an area that's still evolving. I think as we look at the guidance that's come from the governor's office, they do allow sports. I think the other thing that's evolving is for sports-specific standards or for safety practice for various sports. They're still talking about the open tournaments. The open tournaments helps. So remember, the NHIA doesn't determine sports, we do. But if they open the tournaments, that gives us the full ability to schedule, play who we want, and play as little or as much as we want, and where we want, and still compete for a state tournament in the fall. People would ask, why are you even thinking about sports? And I think as I read through the comments that were in the public, and yes, I realize the booster group probably tweeted out, said flood the comments. But I read through the comments, each one of them. And sports are important to high school kids. In my own life, I was a football player. I don't remember much of my physics, but I do remember, and I can tell you the score of the game and how we love, it's just sports were important. The friends that I made on my teams are still my friends today. They're my closest friend today were the guys I played football with. And when you read those comments about sports, they're important socio-emotional things for our children. It's not just an add-on, but for them, it's a very important part of their development of life. So I understand that part of it. And we'll run sports as much as we can within the guidance that is going on. It's sports specific. I feel it's still evolving. I feel, I'm not absolutely 100% sure that we're going to land on that says every sport will run, but at this point, my recommendation, but with the board approved in the plan, was under green, we'll play the sports with the sport-specific safety protocols and, whatever that comes down from the governor. I don't really have an answer on other co-curriculars, except for we'll try to apply equal standard, sports, band, other things like that. We'll have to try to provide an equal standard and run as many. We'll try to run them as safely, possibly remote and hybrid. The whole middle school sports question, I think it's TBD. I think we haven't heard anything from Tri-County, which is kind of how they play, so I'm not sure whether it'll be inter-school sports. I think at a minimum, we have to think about, we have money to hire a soccer coach, we have money to hire a field hockey coach, at least having those teams meet in our own district and work on skills, work on development, and have those kids play. But if Tri-County runs, we'll have to make a decision about that.
Well, I coach the Bow Memorial School girls soccer who are going for a three-peat this year. So we would like to see that. David Kios and I have been talking. So if we can't do Tri-County, maybe we can do scrimmages against the boys, JV, whatever. I mean, I think the girls, they all live for playing soccer. So I push for that strongly.
And that came through loud and clear in the comments, and I understand that. So, you know, that's what the board has voted on.
Question, I didn't see the sports on the matrix that was up there today. I guess I didn't realize that was still part of the green and yellow.
Well, I think that's part of what we have to still work at, because our sports coupled to the matrix. I mean, originally, and again, as my thinking has evolved on this, and I don't mean to be wishy-washy or flip-floppy, but as people talked to me and said, if you close down a school because you have a case here, does that mean you have to close down all sports? I mean, originally I kind of thought, well, if we go to yellow, we have to close down all sports. And as I talked to some of the people who are thinking it may be more complex than that. So, you know, I don't think I have a hard and fast answer that says, you know, if the high school is in yellow, does that mean that we have to cancel all of our sports? I don't know yet. I mean, I think that's a big thing that has to be operationalized for me over the next couple of weeks.
So I think then we need some clarity on that, because I agree with you. It said that last week on the matrix, but it did for the coding, but I didn't see it this week. And as you can tell from all those comments, a lot of people are very concerned about that very issue.
Yep.
Do you want us to make a motion on something like that? Is that of value to? For what our
the board can do what they want. I'm sorry, I'm starting to lose my flip train a little bit. If the board wants to make a motion, they're more than welcome to make a motion.
I'll make a motion on that. I think we need some clarity. That's okay. Feel free to tweak this motion. Not sure how to make it. I guess a motion that Bow High School will play sports when in green and when allowed by the NHIAA, all sports that are allowed by the NHIAA when in green, and to the extent any portion of the school is not in green, we will defer to Dr. Cascadden and the subcommittee on COVID.
Do you want to include co-curriculars in sports?
Yes, extracurriculars, yeah.
Okay, so that includes sports and co-curriculars. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Okay, any discussion?
Could you just say it one more time?
Thank you, I was trying to think it in my head.
Don't make it do that. It was so clear the first time.
A motion to approve the playing of high school sports in Bow consistent with NHIAA guidelines as long as we are in green, and to the extent any portion of the Bow School District is not in green, whether sports will be played will be determined by Dean Cascadden along with consultation with the subcommittee on COVID.
I think you nailed it the second time.
And co-curriculars.
And co-curriculars.
Okay.
Bryce, is that also not differentiating contract and non-contract?
Correct. If the NHIA is allowing it, then we allow it. NHIA says no.
Don't use the word recognizing is a better word. Recognizing is a better word for the NHIA.
Now, in there, are we making any comment regarding the play of local versus, I think, out of state?
I didn't do that.
Well, I think
play
what's going to happen is if it plays out the way it does, the NHIAA or Bow is going to have to be
flexible in who they play. So, for example, if there's an outbreak in Wyndham, right, or wherever we play, we may not be able to have that.
Right. And we previously discussed potentially, from the get-go, limiting ourselves to the Concord area.
And that would be up to us.
Yeah, so I'm saying, are we discussing that now, or are we just sort of saying we're allowed to play sports and we'll figure that out?
That wasn't part of my motion, but we could do another motion.
Well, I think it needs to be figured out. We don't know what other schools are even doing. There's a lot of schools that might not even be offering.
I think we take this motion,
Let's do
it's
the motion.
broad, and then once there's more data each week, because if you change it up to yellow, right? Yeah.
So this will allow us.
This is just green and gives flexibility in yellow.
That sounds good to me.
All right,
I still second.
all right. All in favor? Jeff, do you have any questions?
Jared, quick clarification. I think the motion was for high school sports. Is there any guidance here for middle school sports?
Not yet. We're gonna do that next.
And then, is there any comment on whether, about protocols for even if we're in green? Are there any guidelines that need to be followed?
Jeff, you cut out. Say it one more time.
When we're in green, are there particular guidelines or protocols that need to be followed for either CDC or through the state for safety reasons?
The state
Sports
has.
specific.
Yeah, the state has sport-specific guidelines, but let me go back to let's go back to Jeff's first question. Given that there's no word on middle school sports from the actual association that we would play under, do we want to include it in the motion?
Sure. But they are governed by the NHIA and all, so.
So stay with your high school.
Let's do this, let's do high school separate. Okay. Jeff Trexler,
Yes.
Jeff Moody,
Yes.
Glenn Madden,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Jarrett, yes, Nicole,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Jenna,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Bryce,
Yes.
10-0. Okay, now, Bryce, what do you want to do with middle school? Now you're the motion guy.
First of all, one point of clarification, if I understand correctly, Dean, when they say open season, what that means.
Open tournament.
Open tournament, what that means is that, the field hockey team, they can play any division school, doesn't matter what, but there still is a state tournament for Division II.
I believe
Division III. The point is you don't have to qualify for the state tournament.
Correct.
Everybody
Which leaves a lot more decision making at the local level. I will tell you, there's been a lot of discussion around contact versus non-contact sports. And I think the sports that people are most concerned about, as you saw with the NHA guideline, football and spirit, because they're heavy contact sports. And then the next one would be soccer and field hockey, because they're contact. In fact, I've heard someone asked me, well, I thought they were gonna not have any mouth guard sports, like any sport that you would wear a mouth guard, they'd say, no, you can't have those sports. But right now, that's not the case. But those are the ones that people are most worried about as far as transmission and playing and so forth. And again, if we open school and you get out there, the competition is starting later, and you get out there and we're still in a very smooth green, that's one thing. If we're starting to move toward yellow, and I don't care if we're playing for the state championship, there could be a time when I say we're just not playing sports. And it may be the day before we play for a state championship. And I'm sorry, but that'll have to be the decision that's made.
Can I input, is that?
Yep.
So, in just what Dean had said, so the state, the council today voted to have open tournaments for all sports other than football and golf at this point, and they'll determine how they're going to finish next week. So that means that, as we talked about last week, that it is open season, that we can schedule, that I would schedule whatever we can or want to or whatever. And it's certainly where the benefit being in the capital region is that's pretty easy for us. We can stay regional, and that's what all the ADs are talking about is we're just going to stay in separate sections. We're not going to travel all over the place. So, and we can play whatever division. So yeah, we can play against Concord High. We can play against smaller schools in the Lakes region. It gives us a lot of flexibility, that's the best case scenario for us. That worked out very well for us today, in my opinion. So that's where we're at with that. And our schedule will be local. It'll be not
every day of the week, it'll be, so that we're spread out, so that and we get as many games as we can. If we have to go to yellow and we stop for 2 weeks, we can do that and still participate if we go back to green by the end of the season.
And that regional group means we would not be playing Manchester for example.
It means we have the choice. Right. So we can say, no, I don't really want to go down. How the state will be divided up, it'll be up to us, and, who we want to play. So we do have that flexibility. Nothing from Tri-County from middle school, and I know you want to get to middle school yet, but I suspect that they will probably follow what the NHI has stated, even though the NHI doesn't have anything off. Or we can just say, we're not going to even play Tri-County, we'll just play around here. We're not tied. We've committed to Tri-County, that doesn't mean we can't back out and say, we're just going to stay.
How do you schedule drafts if that's the case? Does Tri-County usually do that, or does the school do it?
How do we what?
How do you schedule the refs?
All the officials are done through an arbiter, so we pay an arbiter, we pay an assigner for all the officials.
Mike, do you feel that you need anything more from us, or are you comfortable going forward and scheduling?
No, I just wanted to make sure you had any clarification.
So I guess over the middle school, anything else on high school? I guess on the middle school piece, I think of the field hockey, who've always just been found games wherever they could. They weren't part of Tri-County.
But they are now.
Oh, they are now.
Yep.
I guess that's what I'm thinking of. Isn't that what you want as a minimum? You want to be able to play Hopkinton and just whoever hooks it, whoever's around here. Even if there's no Tri-County league, you want to play some games against them. So how do we make a motion on that?
Just what you just did, I guess. Yeah, I mean, have an open season.
Okay, so
would that be?
I think what happened is
I don't know.
in my proposal that you accepted last time, I had said that we are not going to play any inter-school middle school. That was in the proposal. So I think you'd ask me, the motion would be to amend the proposal so that middle school can play inter-school games. If possible.
And I would tag a league to it.
Right.
Today at this point.
And so
See what the league says.
I make a motion for Old Memorial School to play games against teams from other schools.
To amend the proposal.
Yeah, to amend the proposal.
What proposal?
The plan that we accepted last week, the plan said that we weren't going to play middle school sports.
All right, motion to amend the plan to now allow middle school sports to be played against other teams.
Second. Okay, any discussion?
Quick question.
Co-curriculars, Jim. Co-curriculars.
Any co-curriculars?
Yeah, Jeff.
What middle school sports are played?
In the fall, it's cross-country, boys and girls soccer, field hockey. We have had A and a B team in field hockey before. And I think I have them all, don't I, Mike?
Yes, field hockey, soccer, cross-country.
Is no football middle school?
No.
That is a club team, and which club teams will probably follow our league. So
The football?
football is a club team, it's a local club.
Football's waiting for NHIA, to my understanding.
They're waiting for HIA, which is smart, what they should do.
Derek, if I can continue? I guess I'm concerned about the board giving the superintendent a directive regarding sports, and I'm rethinking the past motion as well. I'm really concerned about contact sports and authorizing contact sports, even if we're in green, while at the same time we're requiring kindergarten kids to wear masks. And it seems to be kind of at odds with each other.
Are these indoor and outdoor contact sports?
These are all outdoor.
We're not requiring kindergartners to wear masks outdoors.
Right. Jeff, can you hear?
Yes, I can hear now.
Okay, kindergartners are not required to wear masks outdoors, is what Eric said.
It's hard because the.
I think my point was misconstrued. It was, if we're allowing contact sports at a high school or even the middle school level, how does that jive with requiring, kindergartners and elementary school kids to wear masks in the classroom? It's just a time thing. There's less potential for transmission because it's so, periodic.
They're pretty different. I mean, it is a brief exposure, but in contact sports, and you are talking about maybe sweat. You might be right to talk about people. And I don't know. That's a hard comparison to make, I suppose. They're very different things, but I answer that question.
Yeah, I thought Jeff, it's a good question. You know, it's indoor. Go ahead. It's indoors versus outdoors is the big thing, but I think what the board is doing is saying if we're in green, then we can follow the NHIA's lead. But at any time, if an opponent, you know, or dean feels, or the committee feels, you know, this is going to be an evolving decision, right? Am I not seeing this right? We're basically given the broad authority to play sports, and then we're going to say, hold on, let's take a look at it all the time and make sure we're not exposing or increasing our exposure to our students and the community.
And Eric is.
Okay, well, I guess I'm going back to the motion. I didn't hear all of that in the motion, just that we're allowed to play sports. And I wanted to make sure that was clear, both to the superintendent and to everybody who's paying attention to this meeting, what the board's intention is.
Did I capture you correctly? Go ahead, Glenn.
No, I was just saying Eric had a great point between, you know, 15 kids sitting in a room for 8 hours versus outside fresh air. I think that's why we're putting masks on everybody. Outside is a big difference.
So in soccer and field hockey, I don't know the field hockey numbers, but you got 22 kids on a field that's, you know, 75 yards wide, 100 yards long. I don't know the square footage on the top of my head, but that's a pretty big space.
Yeah, but they all cluster around the ball.
Yeah, well, elementary school.
And then there was a good one.
Hopefully they're getting better at that. Okay, all right, so the motion on the table is
Jeff satisfied?
Jeff, are you satisfied?
Well, I guess I would just want to read that motion again, please.
Okay, please. The middle school.
Middle school one?
Both of them, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
No, we already passed that one.
Yeah,
We're
we
not
already
going
passed
backwards.
the other one.
Enough. All right. Motion to approve middle school sports being played against teams from other towns that overrides a prior proposal that Dean had made, subject to appropriate safety protocols.
And
extracurriculars.
And program.
Right. So it could be the case, so everyone understands that you may not get 40 people in a small room for band, but you can have 11 people on a field for soccer outdoors. So there's a distinction to be made. If it's a sunny day, the band can go outside. I mean, it's just an evolving decision-making process on what's safe and what's not, what works out on a daily basis.
I agree. We're working with unknowns, but
Right.
as best we know, it seems that you're safer outdoors running around as opposed to being clustered indoors in a small group.
Dr. C said he canceled a game
Right.
for the state championship.
Right.
Well, I'll be much more likely to cancel sports than I will to cancel school, which is the way you do it now. I mean, you're more likely to cancel, but I think what you're saying is in general, the board is saying they want to see high school sports played, and they want to see inter-school, middle school sports played under the green.
If possible.
Knowing that they're going to be, you know, you got to look at the safety protocols, and knowing that they can be canceled due to changes in code.
Can I ask a question about the co-curricular, extracurricular portion of this? Because I've been thinking a lot about how that could occur at the middle school safely, and how our existing strategy for risk mitigation is really revolving around the cohorts we're putting together. Because most co-curriculars and extracurriculars really cause cohorts to be mixed, right? You're going to have 5th and 6th graders together. They're not all going to come from one classroom. Because of that, I've really been thinking that to have extracurriculars could be fine and done safely if we're thoughtful about it. But I'm assuming principals would still have the latitude to impose a different restriction around it. Like, for instance, in the middle school, I've been thinking that I would really like to be able to say, even though we are in green, because we do not have the protection of the cohort, we would have extracurricular events occurring that would have 6 feet of social distancing, because you're taking it up a notch because you don't have the cohort essentially. So I'm assuming that that is okay okay even with the way the motion is being read and so forth.
That makes perfect sense, and I think he's correct, right? We don't need to make a separate motion. The principals would always have that kind of a.
Yeah, I think safety has to be the priority, and if there's an ability to make that call, yeah.
But I'm just creating a different standard in that. That's the only thing I want to make sure I put out to the board, because we're in green, and green is like 3+ feet in a mask, and yet.
But it's a goal of 6. Anytime you can, it should be 6.
And I think we're making a minimum standard that we're allowing the sports to occur and expecting you as a principals to have to make those restrictions and changes to tighten it up as we do. I think that's the expectation, yes?
I think it just allows us to start a plan.
Yes.
And that if something changes and we don't decide we don't want to play football, we don't have to play football.
And if you need to impose new rules or restrictions in order to keep everyone safe because of those cohort changes, then you have to do that. That makes perfect sense.
Have we heard from other schools, our high school divisions about what are still involving?
Very much evolving. Some have backed out of contact sports, football and soccer. Some have, not necessarily in the region, just in general, some have decided they're not.
Has anyone done the opposite? Has anyone said we're open for business? We'll play?
Yeah.
Okay.
Guilford approved last night, MB has approved.
MB is approved for play sports,
I believe so.
even though they're on an alternating schedule.
Yeah.
So hopefully we play them when they're later. Not a good joke. Okay. All right. Jeff Drexler.
Yes.
Jeff Moody.
Yes.
Clems.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
Nicole.
Yes.
Jarrett. Yes. Bryce.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Jenna.
Yes.
Deno. Okay. Next topic is how the community can help. How many do we have left on the?
There's like 3 topics.
No, how many people left do we have on the? 4? on the web.
And thanks for,
Oh, great, thanks, Ray.
thanks for giving direction. I'm just realizing the weight of some of the decisions I'm going to be making and the issues that will happen. I'll just tell you right now, I have to make them in the best way, but I don't care if it's the championship. If I feel it's the best thing to do, I'm going to make it just in advance. And then I'm going to go hide because I know those football players are going to get me. How the community can help. This was actually, Robert Loof, one of his comments, former board member. He said, our boat community is standing ready and our Dunbarton community is standing ready to help us any way they can. And so he said, can you put on an agenda how the community can help? So I put 4 things up there. Supplying PPE, cloth masks, and desk barriers. I think the Cub Scouts are already working on some desk barriers to help us. I'm not sure what the buildings need. I think Adam's going to go through his building, start looking at things they need. Lori's going to go through her building, start looking. There may be things we put out to ask the community to help us with. As far as cloth masks go, I think there are some people who are making them in town. I tend to like the white or blue standard surgical one, but I also haven't bought a new pair of pants in a decade. So I would love to have someone make me a beautiful cloth mask.
Can I comment on that for a second? Just because we have 2 local businesses working on that. And Myro Tote through the Boosters Club is making Falcon masks.
They're done and ready. They've been picked up.
And Shirt Masters also has Falcon masks. Shirt Masters owned by Craig Anderson, a bow guy.
And they're doing fundraisers?
The booster is.
What the booster one is, I don't know about Shirt Masters, but I know they're available. I think they're $7 a piece. And I must make one more request. Jarrett Duncan and I both work for a company, Riverstone, whose parent company is Fairfax, who owns Bauer Hockey, and I bought this mask set, and it's phenomenal. It's by far the best mask I've ever had. So consider buying them because they're really good.
And did you say the PTO was giving them out too?
The second thing is becoming. The second thing is our sub pool is going to be low to become a substitute teacher. That does take you actually coming in and signing up. It takes passing a background check. You can't just come in and substitute without being background checked or getting some training that we're going to be working on.
Can I touch on that one too?
Can you, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry I keep interrupting, but This one's important because we're convinced some teachers are going to have colds and sick, and so they're going to be able to teach, but they're going to be remote. And so I think of this as being, any one of us could sit here and essentially babysit a classroom while the teacher's on the screen doing things. I think there's a lot of people.
Bryce, I'm calling you.
But Bryce, we also need people who understand children and who aren't going to, they're going to be nice to children. Okay, so it's not, it is a harder job than just standing in the.
And they still need to come in and do the paperwork.
They need to come in, we need to do the paperwork. You'll need to go through an interview process. We will ask you questions.
But there's a lot of people in the community that can do that.
Yeah.
And bus drivers. We also need bus drivers. Dwayne needs, everyone needs bus drivers. The next one, forming community and neighborhood support groups. As we go through this, kids will be in and out of school, kids will be self-isolating. The best, the community, I've heard of people coming together and saying, we're going to come together as a community, as a small neighborhood and say, if we're remote, we're going to try to band together and help each other out. And one of the things I look for in yellow is like, well, if we form these community and neighborhood support groups, could we cohort kids in a reduced capacity? And it started to get so complicated that I just couldn't even go further. But the whole concept is coming together with your neighbors, coming together with other people. We're going to have to help each other out, get through this. And the last one is building a culture of and practicing mask wearing. It's not going to work if our kids are not wearing masks right now, getting ready to come into school. A couple little things I've seen, parents have said, I use if they want to have technology or screen time, they have to do their screen time with a mask on. That if they, it's summertime, go out and play, don't wear a mask, go out. But if you're going to sit behind the screen, they need to put your mask on. You need to start practicing it. A culture of mask wearing. I'm hoping to see all sorts of beautiful masks, matching outfits. You get your.
Can I say some of that?
Say whatever.
No, I won't say anything. If you are gonna have a mask, are we gonna be monitoring the type of mask?
Yes, and I don't know, can someone help me with that? Give me a resource like.
Cloth or whatever the
Well, I need a
requirements are.
resource I can send to the community that says this is an acceptable mask, and this is how to use them. Again, I have to rely on some people because I can't do it all. But
I know that our nurse is going to be working on that, and also when the kids come to school.
Great, that's all we needed, just direction.
yeah, so, but as far as the culture of mask wearing, it's gotten easier for me. It's still, I have trouble breathing, but it's gotten easier. You got to keep practicing it. That's it for that one. Boards, I'd like to cancel the individual board meetings for 8, 9, and 20. We had a Bow board meeting and a Dunbarton meeting scheduled, and have another SAU board meeting Wednesday, 8, 19, and 6, just to cover anything we need to cover the last time. Is that acceptable?
Sure.
I'll need a motion to do that.
Dean, could the Dunbarton board still have their retreat without you? If you don't want to?
Yes, as long as you tell me that in the morning. So as long as you tell me when you're gonna have your retreat, I can warn that as the retreat on that same day.
Yeah, we can talk about
Yeah,
that.
talk about it separately.
We can talk about that outside of this, right?
Yes, you can talk about it outside of it, and you're okay to do it. I just need to warn that you're having a meeting at 4:00, and then we have the SAU meeting at 6.
All right, motion for the SAO meeting, anyone can make it?
Jared?
Yes, Jeff?
Yeah, I think you have the authority to call a meeting at any time, but it would be good to get a consensus from the board on it. I don't think you need a motion, though.
Okay.
No, not to set a meeting, no, Dean can set.
Okay, then I need a consensus from the board that everyone can make it.
You got it.
August 19th at 6 o'clock.
Administrators, that means that we have Wednesdays, and it is an administrator meeting for us. Because, okay, and the last thing, and this is really, life goes on even when we're dealing with a crisis. Title IX is sexual harassment, and there's been a large change in federal law. We knew it was coming. we've been preparing for it. We sent Marcy for training. Marcy is our Title IX Human Rights Officer. We sent Marcy for training last year. We've been following along in how this has developed over time. But there are a number of Title IX policies that are based on the Drummond and Woodson model that I've attached to the agenda and put there. We are going to follow those policies this fall. Whether you adopt them or not, Marcy and I are going to follow, and our administrators are going to follow those policies because they're basically federal law. And if we want to wait and adopt these as policies, I guess I'm fine. We're having the board wait through them. We had a big policy project. We still have that big policy project. This was part of that big policy project. But I want to give the board a chance to look through those policies. I put them on the agenda so that people can see that we're looking at those. I think Title IX is a big thing that we have to deal with this year. When you look at those policies, I want you to this is the concept. They formalized the investigation process of Title IX very much so, providing a lot more protection to those who are accused. So as you read through the policies, that was one of the things. And it came from the colleges where they felt that students accused of sexual harassment were being railroaded, but it's come down to K-12 too. There's a lot more protections for an official Title IX. At the same time, they narrowed what will be investigated by Title IX. So principals will still be investigating regular harassment, bullying, other behavior. We have the whole MTSSB program going on to help with behavior. But Title IX, specifically sexual harassment, has some very strong policies. The decision that the local board has to look at, and you'll see it's highlighted in yellow when you look at the policies, is the principal is the investigator, who will be either Marcy as the district's Title IX Human Rights, or a designee of her who gets trained to do investigations. They do the investigation, they come to a finding. When that's done, they turn it over to what they call a decision maker, and the decision maker makes a decision about what is the discipline or the corrective action that needs to be put in place. So what we're thinking about as you read through the policies, for the student sexual harassment, the decision maker would be principals, and then there would be appeal to the superintendent, because you always want to have an appeal process in there. For staff, if there is a sexual harassment issue, the decision maker becomes the superintendent with an appeal to the board. So that's kind of, when you read through the policies, you'll see what's highlighted in yellow. That's kind of your local board wiggle room. The rest of it is pretty much boilerplate federal law. We don't have to adopt, I mean, there was a deadline given of August 14th. We don't have to, no one's going to come down and arrest us or cite us for not having the policies passed by August 14th. But I think it's a very important topic. And if we talk about it in our next board meeting, one of the advice that the School Board Association gave was adopt them as interim. Because again, like the guidance that came out on COVID, these just came out like this week. And it's like, but again, everything's been kind of delayed with the COVID. Questions about the policies, or?
I just have one quick question.
Yes.
So would it be a case-by-case basis that she would decide who would do the investigation? Or is it one person's designated and trained and that person does the investigation?
It could be either way. I think there's room in the policy to have a second person do it. If it was an employee case, it's going to be Marcia, because I think she is the district Title IX Human Rights. If it is a building level student case, then that's where I could see it saying but we don't have anyone else trained right now, right?
I think the tricky part, and
Keep up, say it, because you're involved.
yeah, I mean, coming from a district that's working through this as we speak, I think reading some of the things that are now out, people were too close to the situation to make the best decision possible. And I just want to make sure that we have something in our policy that if there's some sort of closeness, then that
Right.
person's not involved at all. I think that was a major mistake.
And please read through the policy, and again, I'm looking, to tell you the truth, I haven't really gone through with this fine tooth comb as I would like to, but I think that's the point. the big point is, and we're gonna train on it, no matter whether you adopt the policy or not, we're training on sexual harassment. It's not allowed here. If you have any suspicion of it, we have a person that you can go to and say, I have a suspicion, an investigation is gonna be done, and then that's gonna be turned over and there's gonna be action taken. And I think that's the message I wanna put out, and having a strong policy is the first part of that message, as you know, I mean, you're working with that.
Question, so if you had all the time in the world, what would be the policy? Would it be this Drummond and Woodson thing, or would you tailor it to Bo?
I think it would be the Drummond and Woodson policy. And I think, you know, there are lawyers, there are law firms. When I read through the school board policy, the problem was that it just got convoluted in the language and so forth. I read through the Drummond and Woodson policy, and I think an educated layperson can read that policy and say, I know what I need to do. And I know what this policy means. And so I was really impressed by it.
So if we have a meeting, right, an SAU meeting on, what'd you say, the 20th or 18th or something?
19th. The 19th.
So you're saying that you think the Drummond and Woodson, that policy that you circulated is essentially appropriate, and so why don't you just notice a vote meeting for the same night, we'll just vote on that, we'll vote on that as an SAU, you guys already have a meeting already scheduled.
Let's talk about that in the room. I know Jeff has some concerns about how it is, but we could definitely do that. We could warn a Bo and a Dunbarton meeting at the same night as the SAU meeting, take care of the policy. But let you at least give a chance to read it and see if that's what you want to do. But I think that's a great idea, and we could warn that meeting.
But I don't want to read it if it's just a temporary one. Like
I don't think it's temporary.
Okay.
I think it's a policy that we want to adopt. I think the reason that, if you look back at the school board adoption notes, what they said is, you need to adopt it so quickly, you want to waive the double reading of policy and things like that. It was just a way for the board to say, if we want to adopt this now, because in the big policy project, you're not only looking at this, but you're going, how does this play into bullying? How does this play into regular harassment? How does this play into all the related policies that sit around Title IX? And we still need to go back and do that. Well, last number.
A quick one on the Title IX. Can we make sure that those policies get posted online prior to our meeting?
They're posted right now online. They're posted as part of this agenda. Hard to find, but I can post them. I mean, yeah, they're attached to this agenda, which was sent out as a parent square. People can click on the link and go right to those policies. I believe they can.
But we can put it someplace where the general public can get it. That's where we usually post our policies, so anybody can go look at it.
Okay. Will do. Got a list going. The last one, I have had, our Chinese teacher has come to me with some sad news. She has to, or she has decided to return to China very quickly. She has a family issue. She's an only child and she has to go back, and she has a family issue with her parents. I talked to her about the possibility of running Chinese as a remote instruction model. And she said with the way that the Chinese government locks down the internet, that would almost be impossible. So without, that's a leave request that the Bo board, I'll discuss it in non-public because it does have some concerns with it. But I've asked the administrators to look at what that would do for our Chinese program. And it just came today, or yesterday? Yes. Just came yesterday. But we would probably not offer Chinese 1 this year because we wouldn't have it, and we would look at how to take our Chinese students either using VLAX or Edgenuity. Is that the other program?
Yeah, I mean, we have some things to work on with Chinese 4 and 5, but that's a separate conversation.
But either using VLAX or Edgenuity to try to see our students who are in the Chinese rotation get through. Yeah. So I wanted to put that out there. And the Bo board will operate on a leave request, but it definitely has programmatic issue. We don't have any other Chinese teacher. We haven't had luck with getting substitute Chinese teachers when we needed to. So, questions about it, or we're trying to figure out what to do. But I wanted to get it out there so people knew.
Okay. Anything else from the board before we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, Jeff Trexler?
Yes.
Jeff Moody? Yes. Glenn?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
Jared, yes. Grace?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Jenna?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for joining in. See you next week, 2 weeks, 19th.
Yeah, I know.